This is Adam Graham from Pretty Much the Present, bringing you a week of old-time radio podcasts. These episodes were originally released back in 2011, and we're releasing them here pretty much as is, with only some extraneous bits such as the opening from all of the episodes after the first episode removed. Because these are old, it should be noted that any offers or promotions mentioned in the episode may not be valid unless they're currently mentioned on the Great Detectives website. Here now is a week of old-time radio detective podcast. Welcome to the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham. If you have a comment, please send it to me, box13@greatdetectives.net. Be sure to cast your vote for the show on Podcast Alley, podcastalley.greatdetectives.net. And become one of our friends on Facebook, facebook.com/radiodetectives. Well, before we get into today's adventure of the Abbotts, I do want to remind you to be sure and check out my wife and I's book, Tales of the Dim Night. It's a fun read with a lot of comedy, some great homages to classic Golden Age superheroes, and a good family story as well. I think you'll enjoy it, and I'd encourage you to get it at dimnight.com, where you can also read reviews of Tales of the Dim Night, as well as some interviews we've done with the book. So go to dimnight.com, or just put Tales of the Dim Night in the search box on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Let's get into today's adventure of the Abbotts, the Blue Rocket Express.
After all, traveling on a luxury train is very glamorous. But did you ever read one of those timetables where it says, baggage car, note, does not carry corpse?
The National Broadcasting Company presents The Adventures of the Abbotts, starring Claudia Morgan and Les Damon as Pat and Jean Abbott, the nationally popular characters of detective fiction created by Francis Crane. NBC invites you to join Pat and Jean each week at this time for an exciting recorded adventure in romance and crime. Tonight's story, The Blue Rocket Express. And here is Jean Abbott to set the stage for our puzzle in murder.
Pat's office is in San Francisco, but he'd been called to New York on a case, and in order to clear it up, we had to take the Blue Rocket from New York to Chicago for a quick one-day visit. And then we planned to take the rocket back to New York again. We'd checked our luggage through, and we were strolling into Grand Central Terminal.
Jean.
Yes, Pat?
The train doesn't leave for 20 minutes. Why do you always drag me to trains 9 years ahead of time? Now what are we supposed to do? Stand around the terminal twiddling our thumbs?
Don't get excited, dear. They opened the train a half hour early, see? Track 32. It's open already. So come on. Stop being a typical husband and get on the train.
Oh, of all the silly things. Dragging me here so early that I... you go ahead.
Why?
I need razor blades and cigarettes and a couple of magazines I forgot to buy.
We got here too early. Well, you're lucky I brought you here so fast. You'd have forgotten about it.
Okay, now just stop being a typical wife and get on the train.
I checked our space at the desk inside the gate and went into the lounge car. I just lit a cigarette when the only other passenger in the lounge, a small, bespectacled chap, nodded at me quite cheerfully.
Rather pleasant to board the train early, isn't it?
Yes, it's very comfortable.
Are you going to Chicago or on to California?
Just to Chicago for the moment.
Oh. My name's Duffield, Professor Ernest Duffield.
Mine's Abbott. Jean Abbott. You with the University of Chicago, Professor?
Oh, no. I'm going to California. I'm in the through car.
Oh, well, how do they work that? I've always flown across.
Well, you see, they switch the car off in Chicago and then hitch it on to the back of the El Dorado. That way, as they say in the ads, you don't have to change trains.
What do you teach, Professor?
Well, I'm not teaching anymore, Mrs. Abbott. I'm doing research.
Oh.
Matter of fact, that's why I'm going to Los Angeles to a conference.
And what's your subject?
Bacterial warfare.
Oh, I hate those words. Thank heavens no one's tried that yet.
Oh, but they have.
That sounds horrible. What is this conference in California?
I'm very sorry indeed, but I cannot discuss that. It would be classified information. Now, if you'll excuse me...
Please don't go. My husband would love to meet you.
Well, I'd be delighted to meet him, too, but I'm, well, sort of an old eccentric, I guess you might say. I can't stand crowds. The moment the train fills up, I prefer retiring to my compartment until the end of the trip. I'm alone. I can relax, read.
Goodbye, Professor. It's been most interesting.
Thank you, Mrs. Abbott. Good evening.
Well, leaving us so soon, friend? My name is Charlie Drake. Stick around, friend. I have a few stories you'll like.
I beg your pardon.
Well, get him. He ain't square. He's oblong. How about you, ma'am? I guess we might as well be friends. We're fellow travelers on the old choo-choo. Drake's the name, Charlie Drake. I'm the original good time Charlie.
Uh-huh.
You, traveling alone, honey? Just a small-town girl at the mercy of all the traveling salesmen?
No. I'm with my husband.
Oh, well, that ties it.
In fact, here he comes.
Well, I got everything I needed, Jean.
Pat, this is Charlie Drake, my husband.
Look, how's for all of us whipping up a little bridge game? Let's see, there's three of us here. Who's that fellow over there in the corner? Anybody know him, the old geezer?
No, we don't.
What do you say there, stranger? How about for being a fourth at bridge? Eh? Oh, foxy grandpa, a little on the deaf side, huh? Well, I can always keep the folks happy. I don't believe I caught your name.
I'm Pat Abbott. This is my wife, Jean.
Going to little old Chicago, are you? So am I. I'd love to be on that through car to sunny California, but business forbids. You got nice accommodations?
Yes, we're quite happy about it.
Well, look, I'm in car 181, compartment C. Open day and night, never a dull moment. Anytime you're feeling blue, you want a few laughs, call on your good friend Charlie. Hey, have you two heard the one about the near-sighted octopus and the bagpipes? Have you? You'll bust your buttons, kid. This one's a real knee-slapper. Now, listen here. It seems the octopus went to a...
Who is it?
Pullman conductor, sir. Urgent telegram for Professor Duffield.
Oh, all right. Just a moment. Find the light. And my bathrobe. Yes?
Shut up, Professor. Get back into your compartment.
What are you doing with that gun? Who are you? What do you want?
You're bringing something to that California conference, Professor. It's a culture. Little germs in a flask.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Now, don't stall. There's no time. I know all about it. You've made a discovery. It's the most powerful bacterial weapon ever devised. The easiest to make, too. Quickest, cheapest. Now, where is it? Where's the flask?
Get out of here.
I want the flask, Professor, and right now. Be smart and turn it over.
Who are you?
Well, I guess you'd call me a salesman. I pick up little items like yours and then put them on the open market. Sell them to the highest bidder. You'd be surprised how these items draw customers. In America, Mexico City, Cairo, Berlin. I get around. I do very nicely. Now, where's the flask?
Stay away from there.
Is it in the medicine cabinet?
All I have to do is shout. The conductor will
You
come.
open your mouth, and I'll put half a dozen bullets into that celebrated brain of yours. The flask in one of your valises?
I'm going to give you 5 seconds to get out of this compartment. The flask is top secret property of the United States government. You must be out of your mind trying to get away with a thing like this.
I've done pretty well before. Now talk up, Professor. Where the devil is that culture?
I said I'd wait 5 seconds. You've about used them up.
You don't really want to die, do you, Professor? You have so much to contribute to America. Why get yourself knocked off? Don't you have a family, Professor? Friends? Don't you want to go on living? Professor, you're just begging to be killed, and I'm just the guy to do it. You know, I could even make it worth your while, Professor. I'll get lots of dough for the flask. Maybe I could cut you in for a piece. Now, where is the blasted culture, Professor? Don't touch that bell. Keep your hands off that bell or I'll crack your head open with this gun. So help me out.
After Pat and I left the lounge, we didn't see the professor or Good Time Charlie for the rest of the trip. We left the train at Chicago without knowing there was anything wrong. Neither did anybody else. Pat tended to his business and then took a relaxing spin on Lakeshore Drive in a cab. And by early evening, we were back on the return trip of the Blue Rocket Express heading for New York. After dinner in our compartment... Pat, I've been wondering. This is car 181, compartment C. Now, where did I hear that before?
From that big bore, Charlie. He said this was his compartment on the way to Chicago. Oh, I'm awfully tired, darling. I think I'll hit the hay.
Well, I'm wide awake. Night Owl Jean, they call me.
Okay. You go on up to the lounge. I'm going to ring for the porter and have him make up the berths. I'm knocked out.
Well, thank goodness we lost Good Time Charlie. I was afraid we'd run into him again. Or when we got off in Chicago.
Yeah. Let's come in. Oh, porter, make up our berths, please. Thank you.
Oh, I'll step out of your way, Porter, so you can pull down that upper. Pat, look. There's a body up there.
Yes, a dead body.
Oh, Pat.
Get the conductor, please, porter. Oh, someone did quite a job on him.
Well, it's Professor Duffield.
What? Who's he?
Well, I met him in the lounge car when we were leaving New York before you got here. He's a scientist and expert on bacteriological warfare.
Well, that makes it worse, much worse. You better have the conductor notify the FBI immediately.
But this wasn't his compartment. What was he doing in here?
The porter tells me someone's died in here.
Yes, conductor. When he lowered the berth a moment ago, we found this body.
What are your names?
Mr. and Mrs. Patrick Abbott.
All right. I'll find another space for you. Now, don't discuss this with anyone under any circumstances, except the police. I'll have them aboard on it at our next stop. Now, we'll take care of everything now. Just keep calm and keep quiet. Don't go to sleep in the space I give you until I've had a chance to get more information from you.
This man, the dead man, was in the wrong compartment.
Oh, what do you mean?
Well, I met him on the way to Chicago on this train last night. If he was murdered and then his body was shoved into the upper berth and left sealed there, this is not the compartment he had for himself. His name is Professor Duffield. He was originally on the through car to California.
He was in highly classified government work, conductor. You better report that instantly when you contact the police.
My schedule book says the man who occupied this space on our trip out was a Mr. Charles Drake.
Now, conductor, my wife wouldn't make a mistake. Besides, Charlie Drake of Good Time Charlie, as he called himself, got off in Chicago. This is not Drake. Look, would you do something for me?
Oh, what is it?
Here are my credentials. I'm a private investigator. The New York police will know my name if you want to check. So will the FBI and the Pentagon. I've been on cases involving classified material.
Well, you tell all this to the police, Abbott. I'm just a conductor trying to get a train into New York.
All right. Now, this train is a radio phone. So is the El Dorado. And time may be terribly important. Would you let me call them?
Well, what for?
I want to ask them if Professor Duffield is aboard.
Well, he's lying there dead, isn't he?
Look, just let me make the call. I have a theory. There's a phone in the diesel cab of the El Dorado. I read about it in the magazine.
No, I can't let people play games now, Mr. Abbott. I have to see if there's a doctor aboard. I have to contact the police at the next town.
Just the one call. I have the right to do that, don't I? Look, I can't get away, can I? You can listen to the conversation if you like. I'm telling you, this may mean the solution of the case.
Okay, make your call. There's 2 cars ahead.
Thanks. Come on, Gene. Where are we, conductor? And what time is it?
Approaching Manfield, Ohio. It's 8:55.
Mobile operator. This is RY64372. I want BX6500.
Oh, you think you'll get through, Pat?
Probably. I've got to ask them this question.
I don't get it. Professor Duffield's dead. in compartment C, and then you're calling to ask...
El Dorado, this is Patrick Abbott. I'm a private detective. Aboard the Streamliner Blue Rocket. You what? Okay, get on, conductor.
Hello, El Dorado. This is John L. McLeod, conductor aboard 15. Yes. Yes, it's all right. I understand. Yes. What's your question, Abbott?
Do they have a Professor Ernest Duffield aboard? Passenger for Union Station, Los Angeles. In a compartment on the through car.
Duffield for L.A. in the through car. Got a passenger of that description?
Well?
But what's the answer?
Yes. Are you certain? He is? Thank you. Goodbye.
What'd they say?
They have a Professor Duffield. He's fine, enjoying the trip. Of all the ridiculous gags to
Well,
pull...
that's impossible. The dead man is the professor.
All right. The police will take over shortly. We'll find out all the answers. They're getting aboard at the next stop 2 or 3 minutes now.
You said you'd find another space for us.
Yes, I'll try. Now, please, you wait here. I'll be back shortly.
All right. That's good. This is just what I wanted.
What are you going to do?
Follow me to the door.
But
now,
Pat,
never mind. The conductor has been so nice, I wouldn't want to spoil a beautiful friendship. Now, this train is slowing down. Just stand here. I'll get these latches open on this door. Now, in about 10 seconds, as the train slows down some more, you jump.
What?
Just fall easy. You'll tumble on the ground a bit, that's all.
Well, you can't skip out now. We're in the middle of nowhere. You'll be...
And we need every second, dear. Without any interference. Are you ready?
Well, the train's going too fast. I'm
now
not...
jump!
We were lucky. We landed on soft ground. Oh, thank goodness the train wasn't going quickly. It was very dark. We were in deep grass somewhere in the middle of Ohio. No lights anywhere. Nothing.
Now, let's see if we can...
If we can what, my dear? Crazy, Mr. Abbott. Exactly how do we solve a murder case involving a top-flight scientist by roaming around here by the railroad tracks?
Dear, this is Mansfield. I saw on the timetable that the El Dorado is due at La Junta, Colorado, about 5:40 in the morning. Now, if we can find a road and get a hitch and grab a plane...
Yes, if...
Look. Through the grass. There's a paved road way up there. I saw a headlight. Come on. Let's try for that hitch. Hurry, Gene.
We got the hitch in an old Model T. A very friendly farmer picked us up and told us there was a small airport about 15 miles away. A young veteran was operating a cargo plane service out of it. We bounced along the 15 miles in the old Lizzie, rattling like the famous skeletons on a tin roof. At the airport, we met the veteran. We thought we'd have trouble, but he was an eager kid, and the idea of trying to catch the El Dorado appealed to him. We stepped into his plane.
Yeah, I think we can do it, Mr. Abbott. Where do you figure on landing?
Well, that would be up to you, of course.
Oh?
But I'd like to pick them up somewhere around La Junta. If not, perhaps we might catch them in New Mexico.
Okay, now, you keep the timetable of the El Dorado in front of me, and I'll head for La Junta.
Well, isn't that country out there pretty rugged?
Yes, ma'am. Cliffs, hilly, rough terrain.
Well, can you make a landing out there where we can walk away from?
Ma'am, I used to fly over a spot called the Hump back in the war. From Assam to come in. If you can fly over that, anything else is a vacation with pay.
Oh, fine. That's a help. It's all we need. Real soupy storm. Now we've got to get through.
Cross your fingers, I'm taking off. Only by the way.
Yes?
There aren't any parachutes.
We took off. Pat and I squatted on bucket seats in the back. The weather was awful. The little plane rocked, rolled, and practically stood still in midair. Time was passing. Precious time. Pat?
Yes, Gene?
How do you fellas do it?
Do what?
Just sit there quiet-like as if you were on a pleasure jaunt. Me? I've bitten what's left of my nails. I've recited pertinent excerpts from a book I read called How to Keep Calm in a Crisis.
Well, just relax. There's work to be done.
Oh, yes, you always say that. But you have ice water in your veins. You're the rugged type. Me, I'm the delicate, scare real easy type.
It's none of my business, Mr. Abbott. It's kind of silly to ask now, but are you 100% certain this trip was necessary? Why couldn't you have left it to the police where the train stopped?
Because I'm after that train. By the time I convinced the authorities about who I am, what I suspected, what was going on, and fought through the right channels to the right authorities, it'd be all over. But really over.
How to keep calm in a crisis. Remember the key words. What the dickens are those key words?
I'm down about as low as I can get. We ought to be directly over the railroad tracks. If we can't get any lower, we'll smack up.
Well, have you got any field glasses in this flying percolator?
Yeah, around here somewhere. See if you can spot the train. It shouldn't be too hard. The Eldorado's got a headlight that throws a beam about a half a mile.
Yeah, I've got the glasses. I'm watching.
Pat, we're awfully low.
Yes, ma'am.
If he suddenly spots anything and has to climb to avoid it, we might stall, mightn't we?
Now, just relax, dear. I told you before...
You see the train?
No, not yet.
Well, you better see it soon, Mr. Abbott. I can't keep this up indefinitely. If we come to a very high spot, I may not be able to hedge hop like I'm doing.
Well, it should be here. Unless it's late. I don't see a thing. Just miles of track. I can just about make out the tracks. This storm is cutting the visibility down too much.
Are you positive you're right about the time and the place?
Yes, absolutely, Jim. The only thing could throw us is if that train is very late. That could be. Then we'd have to backtrack.
Well, it probably is late with this weather.
Now, if you just keep mum, dear, Wait a minute, wait. Wait a second, I've spotted it. I see it. A streamliner, about 20 cars. There's no freight. It's lit up like a Christmas tree down there.
Oh, thank heavens. Now what?
Can you get about 10 or 15 miles ahead of her and find a place to sit this plane down?
I can try. Oh, my aching GI back. Find a place to sit down here, huh?
We've got to, my friend. A scientist with top secret information has been killed. His head was bashed in.
Holy Aunt Hannah, is that what
Yes.
this trip...
The killers are on that train. So put it down sweet and gentle and make it real fast.
If I can see a big enough stretch. This is a very small plane, but that doesn't mean we can land on a dime. You know, Wait a minute. I see a spot. Doesn't look too bad. Because that rain's got so many puddles going, we could land and maybe hit a ditch or a gully or give hole and turn right over. I'll never see it coming.
All right. Put it down, pal.
Huh?
Right where you think we have a chance to make it.
Okay, now if I overshoot this field, there's a cliff up ahead there, see?
Let me see.
We'll go right off the cliff.
Now put it down, I said. Steady. Jean, dear.
Yeah.
Brace yourself against that seat.
Wish I could see more, but here goes. Start praying.
Easy, boy. Easy. That's it.
Pat, I can't look.
Easy.
This is it. Now.
Pat, the cliff. We're too close. We're too close.
Made it.
Oh, brother.
That's wonderful. Beautiful job. Now, look. We got emergency flares?
Yeah, under the seat.
Fine, I'll take a few.
What in the world are you going to do now?
Set these off on the track in front of the El Dorado and hope there isn't an accident. They do 90 miles an hour on some of these stretches.
We ran through the rain to the tracks. The pilot stayed back with his plane and was to join us later.
I'll light a flare here, Gene. There. Now, just hope the rain doesn't kill it. You hear the train coming?
No, not yet.
Okay. Put another flare here. There. Now, let's see. Well, no curves on this approach. That's good. The engineer will see the flares early. Only it takes him almost a mile to come to a full stop. There. That's it. Now, just wait and watch.
Pat, you need a gun if you're going to board this train.
Yes, I need a lot of things, but I don't have any of them. I just have to take my chances. Good. He's seen it. You keep wide of the track, Gene. Very wide.
Yes, I am, dear.
He's slowing down. Now, look, when it gets to very slow speed, you watch down the left side. Watch the car doors. Someone might try to sneak off. I'll watch to my right. Shout if you see anything suspicious. Now, as she stops, run down a way so you can see more of the train. That's the girl. Now, look for the conductor. Now, don't say anything. Let me do all the talking. There he is. There comes the conductor.
Hey, what's up?
Aye, set those flares, conductor.
What's the matter? Is this part of washout? What's wrong here?
My name is Abbott, Pat Abbott. This is my wife, Jean. I'm a private detective. We had to stop your train.
Why?
I want to see a passenger of yours immediately, Professor Duffield. He called you about it on the radio phone, remember?
Yeah?
Now, I have no time to explain. The through car, the last one?
Yes, now, but wait a minute. You have no right to do this. You've already broken the law. Setting up flares like that.
All right. Now, you come with me. There's a murder involved. Any armed police aboard? We could use them.
No, and if what you're telling me is a lot of malarkey,
Now, let's get
I'll
on board. Step up, Jean. All right, now. Which compartment is Professor Duffield?
Compartment D.
Here it is, Pat.
Sorry, conductor. I'm going in.
Oh, just a minute, you. You can't just...
Yes, what is it?
Pat, it's Charlie. Good time, Charlie.
Well, what are you doing here? I thought you...
Thought that we were on our way to New York by now, Charlie? Yes, we might have been.
Well, Mr. Abbott, there's Professor Duffield. Now, what's all the excitement about? You're talking to Professor Duffield.
This man is not Duffield, conductor.
Get out of my way.
Stay where you are, Charlie.
Charlie?
This man has been masquerading as Professor Duffield. He murdered the professor on the blue rocket to Chicago. Then he hid the body in the upper berth of his compartment.
You don't get out of my
You
way.
left the body in your own compartment when you took the professor's space in the through car. All the crews are changed. You told everyone in the El Dorado that you were Duffield.
All right, Abbott. If you won't get out of my way.
Put down that gun,
Everybody, out of my way. I'll shoot anybody that tries to follow me. Don't move till I'm off this car.
Pat, how'll we stop him?
I'll get after him. That flask he took with him may be terribly important.
Pat, come back. He'll kill you.
He's left the train. I can see him through this window. He's running up the hill out there.
Pat, don't!
The door he slammed. Yeah, I got it. Come back, Charlie!
I told you not to follow me, Abbott.
I said come back!
I won't miss this time.
Now look out! Behind you, the cliff!
Charlie, gripping the flask, fell 3,000 feet. And turning to fire at Pat, he didn't notice that he was beside that same ominous cliff we almost went over when we were in the plane. Sometime later, Pat and I were back on the El Dorado. The conductor and local police were conferring about the crime. Pat and I were having hot coffee in the lounge.
Well, Jean, I know exactly what you're going to say.
Do you?
Yes, you're very upset because I took so many chances.
Well, I certainly am. After all these years of married life, I've become rather fond of you, Patrick, and I'd hate to see...
beg your pardon, Mr. Abbott.
Oh.
Mrs. Abbott.
Oh, hello. I remember you from the Blue Rocket. You're the gentleman who wouldn't play bridge with us.
Yes. I think I'd best introduce myself. I am Professor Ernest Duffield.
You're what?
That is correct. My identification papers. Would you care to see them, Mr. Abbott?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They told me what you did. I am extremely grateful. And so I imagine is the government. It is quite simple. The man Charles Drake murdered was hired to impersonate me. I was bitterly opposed to the idea, but the Scientists' Commission insisted upon it. I pleaded with them, but they wouldn't listen. The chap volunteered for the job, fully realizing how dangerous it was.
Well, Professor, your flask is gone. I presume it contains something very valuable.
It was supposed to contain something valuable, Mr. Abbott. And Mr. Drake went to great pains to find it, but, of course, it was worthless. The flask Mr. Drake died with in his hand was a nickel's worth of colored water. The real flask obviously is being sent to California by other means.
And how do we know you're Professor Duffield? I don't like to seem rude or melodramatic, but couldn't those identification papers be a government-manufactured fake for security reasons? Couldn't you be a government agent, maybe, impersonating Duffield, too? Did the government take the chance of revealing who the real man is even now?
Did they, Mrs. Abbott?
Pat and I finally got back aboard the Blue Rocket on our way to New York. We were alone in our bedroom. Pat, do you realize you haven't kissed me since we left New York 3 days ago?
My, that's quite a debt I owe, isn't it?
You owe me 228 kisses, plus interest and carrying charges. A grand total of 343.
Wow. I better start paying off, huh?
Well, you'll find this is a very friendly bank, Mr. Abbott. We wouldn't mind at all if you'd overdraw your account. Moral of the story. There are plenty of fast express trains from Chicago to New York. But if you have a handsome husband who likes to make love to you, don't be a fool. Take a slow train.
The National Broadcasting Company has presented The Adventures of the Abbotts, starring Claudia Morgan and Les Damon as those nationally popular personalities of detective fiction, Pat and Jean Abbott, created by Francis Crane. The cast included Kenny Delmar, Louis Van Ruten, and Mandel Kramer. The Adventures of the Abbotts was written by Howard Nero. Original music composed and conducted by Dewey Bergman. Produced by Ted Lloyd and Bernard L. Schubert. Directed and recorded by Harry Frazee. This is Bill Rippey speaking. Next week, same time, same station, another exciting adventure in crime with Pat and Jean in The Adventures of the Abbotts.
This is the United States Armed Forces Radio and Television Service.
Welcome back. Well, what an exciting episode of the Abbotts. I have to say that this was very suspenseful and thrill-packed. And you did begin to see, I think, in the latter part of the 50s, and there are some Johnny Dollar episodes, with Bob Bailey even, that began to deal with the Cold War and the concerns about security and spies. And they're definitely fascinating episodes. And what I think, for good or ill, makes it very interesting is a lot of these concerns are applicable to today's world. These aren't new concerns. For example, bioterrorism. We're still hearing about it in the news. We just have different folks we're concerned about, but that it's, I guess, some ironic timelessness in the topical nature of the episode. Well, now we turn to listener comments. I got an email here, says, I love your show. Nero, Wolfe, and Box 13 have to be my favorites. My daughter loves Sherlock Holmes. I keep looking for an iPhone audiobook version of your book, but have not found it yet. Well, thanks a lot. We have not yet crafted an audiobook version of the book. It's a challenging thing. When I initially sat down to write it, I just figured, talk into a microphone. But I ended up not as satisfied with the quality. But one thing is, I got a sound recorder for Christmas, and I tried it out at a recent writers' conference, and it actually worked very well at capturing the voice without having to hold the microphone. So I may experiment with that and hope to get that out sometime available in audiobook form. Speaking of books, we have this comment from John. Says, Hi, Adam. I wanted to let you know that your shows have kept me company through many long nights of writing my new hard-boiled mystery. My blood runs cold. Please keep up the great work. Sincerely, John Castle. Well, thanks so much, John, and best of luck to you on your book when it comes out. Well, that will do it for now. We will be back tomorrow with Nero, Wolfe. Well, before we do get started with today's episode of Nero, Wolfe, I do want to let you know about Audible. Audible brings you a great world of audiobooks as well as radio plays. Some great Doctor Who and Poirot and Miss Marple radio plays produced by the BBC are available for your listening pleasure, along with a wide variety of books, thousands of books, on topics ranging from politics and the news to religion and science. You can try Audible out free for 2 weeks and get a free audiobook. Just go to audiblepodcast.com/oldtimeradio. Now let's get into today's episode of Nero, Wolfe, The Case of the Malevolent Medic.
Stay tuned for Nero, Wolfe, transcribed in 30 seconds. Tomorrow, you're invited to a 1-hour concert by the renowned NBC Symphony. The orchestra will be under the direction of Bruno Walter for tomorrow's performance, and celebrated violinist Joseph Szigeti will be featured soloist. Selections for tomorrow include the overture to Mozart's Marriage of Figaro and the same composer's brilliant concerto for violin and orchestra. You're invited every Saturday to a concert by the NBC Symphony. Ladies and gentlemen, the ringing of that phone bell brings you mystery, adventure.
Nero Wolfe's office, Archie Goodwin speaking. Who? Mr. Hal Horton, United Industries? Oh, I see. Well, I must warn you, Mr. Horton, Mr. Wolfe doesn't take kindly to big industrialists. Says their great wealth upsets his digestion. Why do you want to see him? The connection's bad. I don't hear you. Who? Who? Mr. Horton, who? We're cut off.
What is it, Mr. Goodwin?
Mr. Hal Horton called.
I understand that. I won't see him. Tell him what money I have to invest I put into orchid plants.
Mr. Horton wasn't promoting anything.
And what did he call you for?
The great Horton needs a detective. Maybe just my occupational reflex, but I thought he said somebody'd been murdered.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's that genius who is the bulkiest, balkiest, most ponderous, and most brilliant detective in the world. Yes, none other than that chair-borne mass of unpredictable intellect, Nero Wolfe, created by Rex Stout and brought to you in a new series of adventures over this NBC network in the person of Mr. Sidney Greenstreet.
It turned out that what Horton had said had been murder, which became celebrated in the case of the malevolent medic. But its solution wasn't a simple matter of following up his accusation. It had false clues mixed all through it like raisins in a pudding. The man we came to know as the malevolent medic was young Dr. Benjamin Sloan. The case began on the sunny afternoon when Grace Banks, his nurse, came into his private office.
Waiting room's finally empty, I take it?
Well, there's one more patient, darling. I'm sorry, doctor. Mrs. Horton's here for another of the thiamine chloride shots you ordered for.
I said you could give her those, Grace. She doesn't have to wait to see me.
Oh, she's hung up her mink coat, parked her orchid and her alligator bag, and filled up all the ashtrays with lipstick cigarette stubs. Mrs. Horton prefers to wait for you. She seems very upset.
I hoped she'd get hold of herself.
Mrs. Hal Horton with all that money. Whatever gives her such jitters? Darling, if I ever get in that condition after we're married, please shoot me.
I've advised her to go to a specialist. Hers isn't a true medical case. Well, I'll do what I can. Get a needle ready, will you, Grace, and show Mrs. Horton in.
Yes, darling. I mean, doctor. Mrs. Horton, will you step in now?
Been in that waiting room for hours. Ben, I wrote you every day this week. Why didn't you answer me?
You say your health hasn't improved, Leslie.
I'm worse. Much worse.
Still chain smoking, drinking, and the sleeping pills?
I have to take something. I can't walk the floor all night, can I? Thinking.
Why are you so unhappy, Leslie? You have what you always said you wanted. Money, clothes, excitement.
You have the right to say that. But don't. Please don't.
I'm only pointing out facts you should face. I told you from the beginning you need a nerve specialist.
I need you. Nobody else can help me at all.
Leslie, you went over this the last time you were here, and in all those letters you've been sending. Now, let's cross it off for good, shall we?
Don't talk like that. You don't mean
I'm no longer a lovesick dope, and you're the wife of one of the biggest industrialists in the country.
Yes, Hal Horton. I despise him. He thinks his money makes him God. He thinks he can buy anything that he bought me. He made me think I was getting the world with a fence around it. Everything I want is on the other side of that fence.
You don't know what you do want.
I want us the way we used to be, happy in love together.
Leslie, please be quiet.
Why?
Miss Banks is in the laboratory. She can hear you.
What of it? I'm not ashamed. I'll tell her. I'll tell everybody. Imagine Hal's face when he finds out I'm leaving him, but I'm coming back to you. He already knows about you. I told him you were in love with me, that you're jealous. He doesn't like it.
Leslie, you're raving. Now stop it.
You always said I was the most attractive woman in the world.
You made your choice. Now get this into your head. I'm really in love now. In a few weeks, I'm going to be married. Now I'll get your medicine.
So it's really true. You are going to be married.
Yes.
I'd heard it, but I didn't believe it. Going to marry a nurse. All my friends have known and been laughing at me.
Please, now that's enough.
I made a plan, a wonderful, beautiful plan about us. Ben, you love me. Ben, say you love me.
Mrs. Horton, that is all over.
Don't love me.
No longer. You're here as my patient, and that's all. After this treatment, I must ask you to get another doctor.
A wonderful, beautiful plan for us. And now she threatens to step in and spoil it. Well, maybe I'll spoil a few plans. How would you like that?
Threats will accomplish nothing.
I can ruin things for you, Ben. All those fancy ideas of yours about having a fine practice, being a great doctor. Do you want to give those up? I can arrange it so that maybe there won't be any wonderful future for you. Are you prepared to face that possibility? Because I'm prepared to make it a reality. And I mean it. You'll regret this day as long as you live.
I'll get your medicine, Mrs. Horton.
Hand me my bag. Thank you. Oh, I hate you, Ben. I hate you both.
Sorry to have kept you waiting, Mrs. Horton. Miss Banks had to do a repair job before she could use the sterilizer. Alcohol, Miss Banks?
Yes, Dr. Sloan. Now, Mrs. Horton, may I help?
Thanks. So nice of you.
There. Right side for the hypo this time, isn't it? Just touch with this cotton. Ready now, Doctor.
Oh,
what's the matter, Mrs. Horton?
I'm just cold. The alcohol.
After this, I advise you to go home and rest. These massive doses are a little painful, but they give results. There. That's all. Just relax here, and you can leave in 10 minutes. Come, Miss Banks. I want to talk to you.
Doctor! I feel sick. I feel very sick.
You might as well stop acting.
I can't get up. My feet.
Ben, look at her. Something's happened.
Hysteria.
No, her face. Oh, Ben, she's falling. Mrs. Horton, hold on to me. I've got you.
Hold her up. Leslie, what is it?
Pain. Terrible pain.
Where? What from?
Sick everywhere. Pain. Everything's pain. Pain in my head. Pain in my feet. My feet. My feet.
Doctor, she's dead.
Yes, Grace. Get a card from the files. I want to study it. From the first day Mrs. Horton came here.
What was it, Ben? What happened to her?
Symptoms are of a heart condition from which it seems the patient has just expired. Then you must call her husband. Grace, did you hear me?
Yes, Dr. Sloan.
Well, I discourage your visit here, Mr. Horton. I do have a sort of curiosity about the operation of so-called big business. Maybe offer you a glass of beer and hear an explanation of the rise and fall of this morning's stock market.
You don't think I've come here socially? I wish to engage your services for...
Not available.
You're a detective, aren't you?
Specializing in cases that interest me.
Sherry, Mr. Horton?
I don't need it, thank you.
But Mr. Wolfe says he specializes in cases that
I've just got here. I haven't told my story. I don't believe you even know who I am.
Oh, yes, we do. We do indeed. A millionaire.
Did I offend you by speaking of a fee?
No, on the contrary. It is that portion of your conversation which interested me most. Frankly, I planned to spend the evening examining the first edition of Henry James I'd like to purchase, and the word fee suggested a possible way. Now, what have you done, sir?
What have I done?
One doesn't have to be a detective to recognize you're in trouble, Mr. Horton.
Look, Mr. Wolfe, I have done nothing. But I've got a question I've got to have answered. I need facts. They tell me you're the man who can give them to me.
If Nero Wolfe can't get them for you, they're not facts, they're fancies, Mr. Horton.
Well, my story's involved.
But the gist of it is, your beautiful wife, a former model, died last week. The death certificate indicated a heart attack. You suggest she was murdered.
How did you know?
Never mind how I came to my conclusions. How did you come to yours?
Leslie had been going to a Dr. Benjamin Sloan. She said he was a specialist. Some friend had recommended. She'd been upset. He was giving her vitamin B shots, she told me.
You doubt that was true?
Dr. Sloan informed me, after she died in his office, there'd been a heart condition from the beginning. Well, I don't believe it. Leslie was a very emotional girl. She'd have been quite frightened of a heart ailment. She'd have told me about it.
Maybe she didn't comprehend its seriousness.
Dr. Sloan did. Why didn't he get in touch with me at once about it? Then, when I went to clear up Leslie's room, I discovered something. Leslie didn't go to Sloan through a friend. She'd known him when she was a model and he was a hospital intern. She'd kept letters he'd written to her then. Love letters.
Indeed.
Well, doesn't that give you an idea, Mr. Wolfe? Sloan lost Leslie to me. No man who'd been in love with Leslie would ever get over it. Would a man be jealous enough, kill a woman he loved, rather than have her belong to another man?
An interesting theory, Mr. Horton, one frequently advanced in fiction. Shall we investigate and see how it works out in fact?
You'll take the case, then.
The intricacies of the feminine nature are challenging if you do not have to come in contact with the creatures. The practical research in such matters I leave to Mr. Goodwin here. It is a field in which he specializes.
But it's you I want.
Our method of operation is not under your control, Mr. Horton. You'll be so kind, Archie. Get a first-hand report of Dr. Benjamin Sloan and the women in his life.
Just came to ask a few routine questions, Dr. Sloan.
I don't understand your interest in the Horton case, Mr. Goodwin, is it?
That's right.
The death certificate was signed and a report made to the medical inspector.
Detectives are a snoopy lot.
Detectives? Are you from the police department?
No, I'm employed to note some details before we close up the Leslie Horton estate. Sudden deaths have to be double-checked.
I'm afraid I can't add a thing to what I've already reported.
Well, thanks for seeing me anyhow. Been a pleasant visit. Ever have a patient die in your office before, Dr. Sloan?
No, but I've seen similar cases in the hospital, of course.
Was Mrs. Horton warned about her heart condition, Dr. Sloan?
I discussed her case with her fully and frankly.
And her husband, wasn't Mr. Horton alarmed?
He didn't know. Mrs. Horton's ailment was, well, not to bore a layman with medical details, was not a fatal one necessarily. She might have gone on for years.
Just played in bad luck, huh?
The worst.
Mm-hmm. When'd you first meet her?
Several weeks ago.
And you saw her how many times?
It's all on the record. She was nervous. I prescribed thiamine chloride. Her medical report card shows that. You read it for yourself.
Well, I guess that's all, Dr. Sloan. Won't bother you further.
Miss Banks will show you out.
Yes, Dr. Sloan?
Sort of a modern Aladdin arrangement, isn't it? I wish I could press a buzzer and have a beautiful girl like you up here.
Mr. Goodwin is leaving.
Oh, this way, Mr. Goodwin. You can use the side door. The waiting room's full of patients.
So long, Doctor.
This way through the lab. There's a door from it into the corridor.
Cozy place, all those bottles. I suppose there's enough stuff in here to kill an army.
To cure one.
Miss Banks, may I say that you're the kind of a nurse that patients dream about? Make it a pleasure to go to a hospital. Blonde hair, blue eyes, winkers an inch long. Are they real?
If you'll excuse me.
What do I have to come down with to persuade you to take care of me, huh?
I don't take cases. I'm a technician. Good day, Mr.
So you work just for Dr. Sloan? That's too bad the way he's involved in this Horton case. It looks serious.
Mrs. Horton simply died of a heart attack in Dr. Sloan's office.
If you wanted to help your boss, Miss Banks, you'd stop rushing around and answer a few questions.
I'm sure Dr. Sloan gave you the necessary information.
Guess he doesn't realize the trouble he's in. If you can supply any details that'll change the picture, you'll be doing him a great favor. He's a nice guy. I want to help.
What is there to say? The report...
Let's get it in your own words. Just what really happened here that day.
Well, Dr. Sloan gave Mrs. Horton the vitamin B shot. That was routine.
Mm-hmm.
But she didn't get up afterward. She said she was sick. And then she fell and I caught her.
And Dr. Sloan administered emergency treatment. What did that consist of, Miss Banks?
All that is in the office record.
What would bring on such an attack?
It could have been several things.
Could it have been something she ate? Acute indigestion affects the heart. Maybe Mrs. Horton would be here now if the doctor thought to use a stomach pump.
He did use one. He did everything there was time to do.
She certainly went in a hurry. Suffer a lot?
She said she was in pain.
Where? Her stomach?
No, not her stomach.
Where then?
She seemed to be in pain all over.
Reflex, maybe? When it was over, what did you do, Miss Banks?
Called Mr. Horton.
Must have been a blow to the great man. I understand she was younger than he is and quite a sultry gal.
I've talked to you professionally because you said it was necessary to help Dr. Sloan. Is that all, Mr. Goodwin?
I guess it is for now. Unless you'll have dinner with me.
Thank you, no.
I'm handsome, hardworking, and harmless. I'll bring you references from my employer. What do you say?
The express elevator's the one on the right.
Must be there's another man.
Wouldn't be the doctor, would it? Well, you'll fit better in a Pullman kitchen than here among the test tubes at that. My reluctant congratulations.
Verdict, Archie?
Innocent as lambs, both Sloan and the nurse.
Evidence to prove it?
My unfailing sensibilities, not the murderer type. Nice couple, doctor and the nurse. I suspect they're engaged. She's so much in love with him, I could have been you, and she wouldn't have known the difference.
Very flattering. Records?
The usual medical record, Mrs. Horton's first visits, symptoms, subsequent visits. Here are the notes on it.
Vitamin B shots. No chance they brought this on, huh?
Dr. Sloan says absolutely not. I checked that with other doctors. But Mrs. Horton did go into this right after the hypo.
Nurse's story jives with Sloan's?
A little more detailed. She says he did everything. He even used a stomach pump.
The woman was in pain? What's this? Head to feet?
My way of saying pain all over.
What other papers did you examine?
Only the medical record.
Get back to Sloan's office late tonight and examine all the papers in his desk.
Can't you trust me? I tell you, there's no reason even to suspect these two.
When you have one of your adolescent infatuations on, blood dripping from a dagger in a girl's hand would look to you like crushed rose petals. With this Grace Banks out of the way, maybe you can recognize evidence.
Sounds like a long, bleak evening.
Hand me that medical book, and then be on your way. I want to think.
Well, good evening, Mr. Goodwin.
Oh, good evening, Dr. Sloan. This is a surprise to us both. I didn't anticipate that you'd be keeping office hours after midnight.
What are you doing in my office at 2 o'clock in the morning, Mr. Goodwin?
Reading your mail and having a ghoulish time surrounded by all these shiny instruments of yours.
You've been rifling my desk.
I wouldn't do that if I were you. I've put things back very neatly, even the letters from this little secret compartment, which isn't secret at all to anybody who knows about desks. I've kept only
Give
one.
me that
Easy. It's the "My darling, mine first, shan't ever give you up one way or another" one. You remember it? I'll bet that nice little nurse you're engaged to never wrote that, did she?
What do you intend to do with it?
Mark it Exhibit A in the Horton murder case. Maybe you'd like to come with me and explain it to Nero Wolfe.
Very moving, very flattering, very interesting if you like women, but also very incriminating, Dr. Sloan.
What does it prove? A silly woman with a nervous breakdown imagined she was infatuated with me.
A woman who is now dead, you must remember, under, shall we say, unusual circumstances. You signed a death certificate which stated Mrs. Horton died of a heart attack. As you signed it, Dr. Sloan, did you remember she had threatened you and heave a sigh of relief that fate had done you such a good turn?
I didn't bear Leslie any ill will. I was sorry for her.
You felt adequate to the situation. You called no other doctor, though there are several in your building.
My first thought, of course, was that it was some extraordinary allergic reaction to the vitamin dose.
It was not until an hour or two after she was dead you decided she expired from a heart attack.
Yes.
How did you explain the pain?
I reported no pain.
Miss Banks said Mrs. Horton had pain from her head to her feet.
Grace said that?
Well, not in those words, but that was the general
Dr. Sloan, why did you use a stomach pump on a heart case?
Why, I told you I tried everything. Sometimes an acute digestive disturbance.
I suggest you did it because to you, as to any qualified physician, the pain in the feet suggested poisoning, a particular kind of poison, an inorganic poison.
There wasn't any in her stomach.
You maintain that? Archie, get the medical examiner on the phone. Tell him the body of Miss Hal Horton must be examined for any evidence of poisoning.
I know you think Mrs. Horton was murdered, but it's impossible. There'd been no one near her.
Miss Banks?
Miss Banks couldn't have done it. She was working with me constantly.
That's what I thought you'd say, Dr. Sloan.
Mr. Wolfe, I had to see you. This is the most dreadful thing I've ever heard of. Trying to accuse Dr. Sloan of murdering a patient.
It appears he had a reason to want Mrs. Horton dead, Miss Banks. She was that thing the poets write about, a woman scorned. She had sent him this hysterical letter threatening scandal if he rejected her. He couldn't control her. She kept coming back to his office making scenes.
He gave her nothing but thiamine chloride. I know. I fixed the shot myself.
Don't start covering for her.
I'm not. I tell you, I filled the needle. And I didn't put anything but thiamine chloride in it. You haven't any reason to think anybody did, except for that letter you stole. If it wasn't for that letter, give it to me. Give it to me.
Stop it, Archie, quick.
Now, drop it, baby. Come away from that fireplace. Why, you little tiger kitten. I didn't think you had it in you. Come on, let go of it. Let go. Give it to Papa. Now, look what you did. You almost got Nero Wolfe out of his chair.
Destroying evidence is a serious offense, young woman.
She kept coming to the office, writing and pestering him. I heard her from the laboratory.
You read her letters, too, didn't you? You knew if something didn't stop her, Dr. Benjamin Sloan was a ruined man.
But he didn't kill her. I know he didn't.
I don't believe he did.
You don't? Well, then who?
You've just provided an excellent motive for having done it yourself, Miss Banks. Pears and white wine. Cold, luscious, exotic. Excellent, Fritz, excellent.
Best thing that's happened today. I don't like this Sloan case. If you ask me, I think that Horton dang got what was coming to it.
Those are not the words of abstract justice, nor the phrases of a gentleman of culture. A good detective never plays favorites. Good night's rest, and you will find your attitude more normal by morning.
You expect to have this case solved by morning?
Solved now. Thanks to the expedition I sent you on this afternoon. The arrests can wait. No one will escape.
I feel like a murderer myself. If I hadn't wormed it out of Grace about the Horton woman complaining of pain, and if you hadn't jumped at the word feet...
That, Archie, my dear fellow, is the purpose for which you exist, to discover pertinent facts. Have we quite finished? Coffee in the study, then.
Here's the door. I'll go.
Mr. Wolfe in?
He isn't seeing anyone this evening, Mr. Horton.
Well, he's seeing me.
Archie, if that's Mr. Horton, I'll see him.
You'd better.
Sorry you found Mr. Goodwin so impossible, Mr. Horton. He came to pay you a call this afternoon. I sent him, but he didn't find you in, did you, Archie?
No, but I made myself at home. I knew anything that would help to solve this case you'd want us to have.
What do you mean? You were in my house? What did you take?
Nothing of monetary value, I assure you, that will not be returned in due course. But before I announce the solution of a case, I like to have all my little props in place. I appreciate a well-rounded performance.
Mr. Wolfe, I've had enough of this foolishness, this delay. I hired you to convict Sloan, not to play parlor games.
You must be patient, Mr. Horton. Don't force me.
I want action.
Well, I had planned to wait until the morning, but if you insist... These papers here may interest you, Mr. Horton. Mr. Goodwin here collects them, your wife's letters.
Leslie's?
You recognize the script? These are addressed to Dr. Sloan.
Do they prove anything against him?
The lady's correspondence should be kept private. This other letter, however, was sent to you.
To me? Leslie's? What? Give it to me.
Easy, Horton, easy. Don't grab.
Oh, but that letter's mine. You stole it from my desk.
There is a point in a case, Mr. Horton, where letters cease to be personal property and become evidence.
What evidence can that letter provide?
It seems you had reason for wanting to kill your wife, Mr. Horton. A man can get annoyed by a note saying his wife never loved him, that all his money isn't enough, and that she's going to another man.
You accusing me of murder?
It could have been the perfect crime. Poison in one of those pills she was forever taking, or on the tip of the cigarette she chain-smoked, in a doctor's office to die in. If you hadn't been fool enough to try to pin it on Sloan, you might have gotten away with it.
If I had known while she was alive what Leslie was, I might have done anything. But that letter you stole from me was one she left under my pillow. I didn't find it until after she was dead. I didn't kill her. Sloan did.
You hired me to prove that, Mr. Horton. Suppose you let me go about my business.
Nero Wolfe's office. Yeah? Oh, you did? Good boy. We'll expect you. I'll tell Mr. Wolfe at once. Medical examiner's officer. Just as you thought, they found poison in the body.
Listen to me.
Inspector Kramer's picking up Dr. Sloan and Grace. They'll be here any minute. Kramer's set to make an arrest.
I told you. The police know it's Sloan.
Put the letters in Mrs. Horton's bag on my desk, Archie.
Leslie's alligator bag? You stole that from my house this afternoon, too. Those things are mine.
Inspector Kramer will want to take them with him.
What, do you think I wanted made public what Leslie did to me? Kramer can't have them.
Maybe the inspector will want to take you, too, Mr. Horton.
Let them in, Archie.
Come in, Inspector Kramer. Dr. Sloan, Miss Banks.
Wolfe asked me to bring them here first before I locked anybody up. Mrs. Horton was murdered, all right. I'm sending a man for Horton, too.
You won't have to. Mr. Horton's waiting here to join the party. Come into Mr. Wolfe's office.
Good evening, Inspector.
Good evening, Wolfe.
Will you all please range yourselves around the room as I indicate? Miss Banks here. Dr. Sloan, Mr. Horton. Archie, you stand between the two men, if you please.
Mr. Wolfe, this is a dreadful mistake. I swear the doctor didn't...
Stop thinking about the doctor. What about you?
If you're accusing Miss Banks, I might as well tell
Hold
you
it,
now.
Dr. Sloan. From here on, anything you say will be held against you.
That's what I want. Let Grace go home and I'll...
For heaven's sake, why don't you arrest the man? Isn't it obvious he's guilty? You and your trumped-up charges against me.
I'll do the talking now, Mr. Horton. Mrs. Horton died from a certain inorganic poisoning. Poison administered in your office, Dr. Sloan, with a hypo syringe.
Let's get it over with. I gave her the hypo.
But I filled the needle.
There you are. They're both guilty.
Which would solve the case if they weren't lying. Miss Banks believes Dr. Sloan killed Leslie for her sake. Dr. Sloan thinks Miss Banks put poison in the hypo to save him from professional ruin. They're trying to protect each other. The fact is, the hypo they gave was perfectly harmless. It did not kill Mrs. Horton.
Then what did?
Mrs. Horton came to your office in desperation, Dr. Sloan. But she came prepared for the worst. You see this handbag? Can any of you identify it?
Yes.
It's hers.
Is it Mr. Horton?
It's Leslie's.
The bag she carried to the office the day she died. Open it, Archie. You will see it contains her change purse, billfold, cigarette case, matches, her handkerchief, nothing more. That is, not unless you look closely. Then you will observe this lining has a double fold.
A secret compartment.
Exactly. We open it this way, and there we find it. A hypodermic needle with which the unhappy woman committed suicide. Miss Banks, Dr. Sloan, you can stop protecting one another. Mr. Horton, the world need never know you were a betrayed husband. Mrs. Horton killed herself while in a confused state following a mental breakdown. The case of the malevolent medic is closed.
How did you ever get the hunch about the handbag, Mr. Wolfe?
I know nothing about women, but on my occasional trips abroad, I have been forced to observe their handbags. Monstrosities. They hold anything and everything.
Now that our guests have gone, Fritz is bringing coffee to the study. Would you like some beer?
I believe I would. Somehow I feel I've earned it.
Here you are.
Poor fellow, I'm very sorry for you.
How so?
This is one case in which there is no falsely accused, unattached young lady for you to squire about. Well, here's to your better luck next time.
You have been listening to The New Adventures of Nero Wolfe, starring Sidney Greenstreet. Tonight's transcribed story by Ruth Adams Knight was based on the characters created by Rex Stout. This is an Edwin Fadiman program, produced and directed by J. Donald Wilson. In the cast were Harry Bartell as Archie Goodwin, and Gene Bates, Vic Perrin, Bruce Payne, Bill Johnstone, and Mary Lansing. Next week at this same time, Nero Wolfe and Archie will bring you The Case of the Hasty Will. Don Stanley speaking. Three chimes mean good times on NBC. There's music and mystery for you every Saturday evening on NBC. For music, tomorrow, your hit parade brings you the top tunes of the land with Snooky Lanson, Eileen Wilson, and Raymond Scott's orchestra. And for mystery, Herbert Marshall stars as the Man Called X, a man in search of adventure who travels wherever there is intrigue, danger, and romance. More good mystery at Sam Spade next on NBC.
Welcome back. Well, a fairly happy ending to this mystery, all things considered. I do have to say, this is one episode where I remembered the plot very well, because the actual plot of the story contradicts the title. There is nothing malevolent about the medic in this story at all. So, a bad choice of titling on behalf of the writers. Well, now we turn to listener comments and feedback. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to Eugene, who gave the show a $20 tip. That's much appreciated, and I'll go ahead and forward on the premium access information to him. I can access our premium site with all the extras we mention as being on the app for those of you who don't have an iPod or an Android phone, and it actually includes all the extras for both Great Detectives and Old Time Dragnet. Well, Chris noticed something, and he begins by saying, by now, you know, I think I recognize voices from your podcast. You know also that I am usually wrong. However, I know who Nero Wolfe is. Granted, I'm still not sure of a few things, but I want to say thank you. Last week, you posted an extra or perhaps filler podcast featuring Sidney Greenstreet. I really enjoyed the story, and I thought I recognized a few voices. The reason they sounded familiar is because I'm a huge fan of The Maltese Falcon and Casablanca. When I heard Sidney's voice and the voice of the short guy from The Villains, a light bulb went off in my head. I knew who Sidney Greenstreet was, and therefore I knew who Nero Wolfe was. I'm certain that you knew this already. However, I felt smarter, but I still don't know the short guy's name. The guy I'm thinking of got shot in Casablanca after he slipped Humphrey Bogart the fake visa. What is his name? The answer, and you are correct. This is the guy, this is kind of a Casablanca mini reunion. And on the premium side of the app, we actually threw in Across the Pacific, which featured the rest of the cast of Casablanca. Or not Casablanca, but Maltese Falcon, with Greenstreet, Bogart, and Mary Astor. But it is Peter Lorre you're thinking of. Also, thank you for answering my random voice questions, even though I could simply Google it. Well, thank you, Chris, and if you are ever curious about who a voice is on the show, I recommend checking out RadioGoldIndex.com. It does not have every show listed, but it's got voice credits for a lot of old radio programs. So you just find the program, go down to the date, and you can find who's on the show. Regarding our Pat Novak for Hire series, being a San Francisco area native, I really, really love the Pat Novak series. I also really dig the insights and behind-the-scenes commentary Adam brings to the show. His voice definitely has a twang to it. I dig that, too. Well, thank you. And we do have an email here from Angie who writes, I wanted to let you know how much I enjoy your podcast. I never miss an episode, and I love your comments. Always interesting and informative. I did try to go to Podcast Alley and vote for you, but no matter how many times I searched Great Detectives or Radio Detectives, I could not find yours on the list. I did find the Dragnet Show, but no Johnny Dollar or George Valentine. That definitely can be a problem if you directly search on Podcast Alley. But I encourage folks to go to podcastalley.greatdetectives.net. We'll get you to exactly where you need to go to vote for us, because, the search function doesn't work too well. Anyway, she said, on a separate note, several years ago, I went through a Nero Wolfe phase. I think I probably checked out and read every Wolfe book my library had. I think my favorite one, and you'll have to check the synopsis to figure out the title, spoil alert, one of Wolfe's men is the culprit. By men, I mean the extra help he sometimes hires. Saul Panzer is the only one I can remember his name right now, but there's a guy, Fred, I think, and a young, handsome guy and a woman. I know there's Fred Durkin and Ori Cather. And he says, I've been reading mysteries since my mom turned me on to Dame Agatha at around 3rd grade, so I'm pretty good at sniffing out the villain. This one totally blew my way. I won't tell you more because I know you are making your way to canon also, but I could not believe one of our guys. I was flabbergasted. I'm aware of the title. It's actually the last Nero Wolfe book written by Stout during his lifetime. I've not read it yet. It's a family affair. In terms of chronology of the Wolfe books, you don't necessarily have to read them in order. I have not, but I am saving a family affair until after I've been through all of the other books in the series. I think the only ones that you need to do in some sort of order is the Arnold Zek trilogy, which is And Be a Villain, The Second Confession, and In the Best of Families. Then there are also 2 books, and I've read about the synopsises. One is called Too Many Cooks, and A Right to Die, which has Wolfe helping out one of the characters he met in Too Many Cooks. And while that character has aged more than 20 years since that book was released in 1938, and A Right to Die was released in the 60s, Wolfe and Goodwin are still the same age they were. But other than that, from what I've learned, it doesn't matter the order you read in, though I think you're probably best starting out with the first two, Fear de Lance and League of Frightened Men. She wraps up by saying, wow, I'm long-winded today. I did not know you did Superman. I love the capes. It is going in the queue today. And if you'd like to listen to Superman, just go to laserandsword.com. We post new episodes every Sunday and Wednesday. And just search for you can also search for Old Time Radio Superman. She says, thank you so much for all your time and effort. Angie, and who writes from Jacksonville, Florida, 75 and sunny today. Woot. Boise, around 52 degrees, overcast. Well, thanks so much, Angie, and thank you for all the comments and feedback. We will be back tomorrow with Let George Do It. Well, in lieu of our normal pre-show commercial, I want to just announce something new we're doing for our listeners. I have really appreciated it when, just doing web searches, I found folks linking to the great detectives of old time radio, either some post, and I know a lot of blogs maintain blog rolls, list of favorite sites, and this does help with rankings and people being able to find the show. So I decided just to formally offer, if anybody links to the site or they have a link to their site from their blog or a personal webpage, we've added another section under our blog roll for friends of the show. So all you need to do is add the link, be sure it's on the front page of your blog or website so people don't have to dig to find it. And we'll go ahead and we'll add you to our Friends of the Show links. Of course, a couple provisos, no adult websites and no splogs, or spam blogs. Just send an email to box13@greatdetectives.net. Well, we're ready for today's episode of Let George Do It, the Rose Petal Staircase.
Personal notice, danger's my stock and trade. If the job's too tough for you to handle, you've got a job for me, George Valentine. Write full details. Standard of California, on behalf of independent Chevron gas stations and standard stations throughout the West, invites you to Let George Do It. The Rose Petal Staircase, another adventure of George Valentine.
My dear Mr. Valentine, once again I take pen in hand despite the fact that you have not answered my first letter. Since that time, my tireless genealogical search has led me to the little town of Culliver, named, as you perhaps know, after the once eminent Senator Culliver. Here in the senator's very house lies the tragic object of my search, guarded faithfully these many years by the senator's two surviving daughters. The ways of fate are strange, and death wears many hats. However, I do not believe that I will require your assistance as anticipated. I can manage women, particularly spinsters. I can make them see the light. And amid the cobwebs and jealous ruins of this house is a marble staircase, which I am sure will lead me not only to the object of my search, but to the resolution of the future as well.
Yes, I am sure I can trick them all. Sincerely, Professor Fulton. Oh, George, we never got a letter from him.
Trick them all. Funny thing to say.
Yeah. And it says, P.S. It's too bad that you couldn't have seen this wonderful staircase, Mr. Valentine. It's a delight to the eye, made of solid marble, but exactly the color of faded rose petals.
Yeah. Brooksy, I wonder what it was that Professor Fulton was searching for that he found there. Genealogist, huh?
Yeah.
Something to do with a person, probably. Or a dead person. Anyway, I'm curious about a
Rose Petal staircase set in cobwebs.
Oh, but indeed, this is not an imposition, Mr. Valentine. My sister Bertha and I often receive callers who are passing through.
You know, mister, it's going to cost you 2 bits.
What's that, driver?
To get her to show you the local ruins, it'll cost you 2 bits.
Mr. Valentine, I'm sure you could dismiss your taxi driver there for the time being.
Oh, relax, Claudine. I'll hang around and wait for them. I got no other customers.
Oh, you must excuse Johnny. He's our town character. So how some of the nicer people have endured him as the only taxi driver these many years.
Yes, sure, of course, I understand. Here, I have 25 cents.
Oh, thank you. Naturally, we only collect it for the local historical society. Every penny of it.
Yes.
Oh, naturally. And now, if you'll excuse the hostess who leads the way. Callers, Bertha? Oh, Bertha, dear, callers.
What? Claudine, no. Tell him to come back later.
Pardon me a moment.
Oh, no, Claudine, can't you? It's almost 3 o'clock.
Oh, I'm sure your watch is fast, my dear. This charming gentleman is Mr. Valentine, and this is Miss Brooks. Oh, how do you do?
How do you do?
The house is a mess. There's that thing I can't reach. There's even cobwebs. I've got a bad heart. I want you to know it's all I can do.
I'm sure they understand the difficulties of the servant problem nowadays, and scarcely expect 2 ladies to sacrifice their other activities. Not to mention the skin of their hands.
The skin of whose hands?
Bertha?
Oh, now, look, please. We just heard about the staircase, and I want...
All right, I don't care. Whatever you want, Claudine. But I warn you, my watch isn't fast. And if you're...
Oh, nonsense, my dear. As all the famous people and handsome young gentlemen in their evening clothes came up to our doorway and in through this hall, a footman stood ready to throw open the doors of the ballroom like this. And there beyond...
Oh, it really is the color of rose petals, isn't it? Oh, it's beautiful.
My father said he stole it from the color of my cheeks. The marble's from Italy, but the design is my own father's. He built it for us, for his girls. Rose-colored marble for the color of my cheeks. I was the oldest, the most beautiful, he said. But there were 3 of us.
3 of you?
We had a younger sister. Her name was Esther. Oh, but I don't see what these...
No, please, let me... There was music then. Music all the time. And dances and young men by the score. And before his death, my father used to tease me over who would be the first to come down on his arm with the rose petals and orange blossoms, and the young man of choice who'd be waiting below with the minister. Oh, there were many young men, Mr. Valentine. But it wasn't I. So I had many an opportunity. And it wasn't poor Bertha, who was never very attractive.
Claudine.
No, it was the youngest, little Esther, who came floating down dressed in white to the arms of her groom. Esther was married.
Claudine, stop it. Please stop it.
And that's why we're still spinsters, Mr. Valentine. Our misfortune dates from then. From 15 years ago. Our responsibility.
What do you mean?
Esther and her handsome, strapping husband left the house by automobile. And the automobile overturned. And Esther was killed.
Oh, but I don't understand about...
Oh, Claudine, look what time it is. Claudine, get them out of here. Get them. Oh.
Yeah, 3 o'clock.
George, a bell. Tiny bell. It's from upstairs, isn't it? Up the staircase.
Our responsibility, Mr. Valentine. For 15 years. Ever since Esther's death. Don't be frightened. Perhaps you'd like to carry a bed tray upstairs.
Man's face in the mirrors.
Oh.
Look at all the mirrors.
Oh, there he is. Over there in the bed.
Oh, yeah. Hello there. I brought your tray up. Oh.
George, he can't speak. He just looks at you.
Yeah. And that's the bell. Hanging from the bed springs.
He's paralyzed.
What?
Moves just enough to make the bell ring. He could see you, though.
Oh, yes, of course.
He can hear, too. Can't you?
Oh, the poor guy.
6 months ago, the doctor said he might even walk again or even talk. He tries to sometimes, but then he gets all upset and can't. He'll be this way forever, I guess.
But how long?
15 years like that, you heard her. 15 years, and us running up and downstairs for him. It's Esther's husband, that's who it is. She was killed in the accident, but he wasn't so lucky. And neither were we.
Oh, please, if he can hear you.
I don't care what he hears anymore. It's what other people hear and say. He's the man, they say, the only man the Colliver girls could ever catch. And they couldn't have caught him if Esther hadn't died and he hadn't been paralyzed.
Miss Oliver, stop it, please. Come on, Angel. I think we'd better get out of here.
Yes, George.
I wish he would, too.
Please, I said.
Don't I, Mr. Fulton? Don't I?
What did you call him?
Hubert Fulton, that's his name.
Fulton. He isn't any relation to a man I met once, is he? A Professor Fulton?
Oh, get out of here. Get out of here right now with your gossip. Your gossip!
Oh, George.
Poor guy.
Well, Mr. Valentine, you ready to go back to the train?
Oh, hello,
Johnny. Everybody calls me Johnny.
Everybody, huh? Well, listen, Johnny, you run the only taxi around here. There's a guy I want to find and talk to right now. His name's Professor Fulton.
I know. He mentioned your name to me once.
He did?
He was up here at the house, about a week ago. Distant relative of Hubert in there.
Yeah, well?
The professor was trying to locate Hubert. Finally found him. I think he, being the only relative, had it in mind to move Hubert out of here, put him in the hospital.
Well, that's the best idea I've heard in years.
Well, I don't know what'll happen now.
What do you mean, now?
The professor's dead.
What?
The other night he slipped, fell all the way down that staircase. Now he's dead.
Just an accident, I presume, wasn't it, Miss Claudine?
Oh, yes. Yes, that's what the coroner said, and of course it was.
Miss Claudine, I think you're lying to us.
What?
Yes. Why are you so upset, so nervous? And even the way you were before, telling us about your family and the staircase. Yes, and right now, why don't you take your hands away from your... Pair of glasses. Pince-nez glasses. With a black ribbon.
His death was an accident. It was. I know it was. He was going to take Hubert away from us. And that would have been such a godsend. Bertha can't stand taking care of him.
Wait a minute. Are these Professor Fulton's glasses?
Oh, I have to tell someone. Yes. He was nearsighted. He tripped and fell. But when I saw him in the funeral parlor, Well, anyway, I found his glasses the next day. Hidden here in my sister's room. Bertha's room.
It's Bertha, Hubert. Bertha. Can you forgive me the cruel things I say in front of you? I have to say them, Hubert. They mustn't ever guess. No one must ever come again to take you away. I've stopped them all. I won't let them. I won't. All right, Hubert. I'll read to you now. My love is strengthened, though more weak in seeming. I love not less, though less the show appear. That love is merchandise, whose rich esteeming the owner's tongue doth publish everywhere. Our love was new, and then but in the spring.
return to tonight's adventure of George Valentine in just a moment. Do you know when most wear occurs inside your car's engine? Does it happen when your car is running or when it's standing still? The right answer is when your car is standing still. It's a fact that 80% of all engine wear happens after you turn off the ignition. It's caused by acid-laden moisture, which forms on cylinder walls and results in corrosion and rust. RPM motor oil is compounded to prevent this damage. RPM keeps a moisture-proof film on internal parts at all times. Even though your car stands still for days or weeks, rust and corrosion can't get started when RPM is in your engine. No wonder RPM motor oil is first choice in the West. It's the oil that stops 80% of engine wear. For the car you love, get RPM motor oil tomorrow. Get it at standard stations and at independent Chevron gas stations where they say and mean, we take better care of your car. And now back to tonight's adventure of George Valentine. The rose-petal staircase, built long ago for beauty and marriage and happiness, but now only a setting for tragedy. For upstairs lies a man paralyzed, the only man the Colliver girls ever caught, so the gossips say. Hubert Fulton, guarded by the spinsters Claudine and Bertha. And when a relative, Professor Fulton, tries to move poor Hubert to a hospital, the professor somehow has an accident and dies on the marble of the staircase. Well, if you're anything like George Valentine, you'll locate a man from out of town like yourself, the professor's lawyer, Mr. Hines.
Mr. Valentine, if it weren't that my firm has handled the Fulton family business for years, I wouldn't have touched that professor with a 10-foot pole. He wasn't a professor at all.
Okay, it was a phony. What else, Mr. Hines?
A gold seeker, my friend. Huh? Do you know the only earthly reason he so kindly came searching for poor Hubert? A relative he'd never even met?
Well,
I'll tell you. Hubert is worth exactly $73,000.
Oh. Well, if Hubert has so much money, why haven't they spent some of it?
Oh, they've taken very good care of him.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, they have. The doctors have been very optimistic, but, well, I'll grant you, it's rather an unhealthy atmosphere right now.
That's an understatement. I think Bertha positively hates Hubert. Always complaining.
Maybe, but Claudine, well, she's full of delusions, grandeur, and beauty. It's true. But at least to her, he's just a responsibility. We'll work out something for him, all right?
Uh-huh. Okay, Mr. Hines.
Just a moment. You still haven't told me exactly what this is about the professor's glasses.
I'm still not going to. There's enough gossip already. Good night, Mr. Hines.
Did you see the coroner, Mr. Valentine?
No, but we will later. He's out on a case.
I wish you wouldn't.
But I have to.
No. Listen to me. I've been sitting here and remembering. I knew so many boys and gentlemen, so very many. I could have had any one I chose if it weren't for the burden of Hubert. But it was so different for Bertha.
How do you mean?
She was never attractive. No one ever liked her. She never had a single opportunity. And it isn't surprising, is it, if a plant that never saw the sunlight should wither in strange patterns. I just mean, she's been so unnaturally intense lately, and her own health isn't good, and perhaps if she went away somewhere, perhaps if she rested, I'm sure I could work out something with that nice Mr. Hines.
You think your sister's getting a little too peculiar, but as for the coroner, you'd like to just let sleeping dogs lie, is that it?
They're both quite peculiar, Mr. Valentine, I just don't want to know any more about what those glasses of the professor's mean.
I'm afraid it's not that easy, Miss Collins.
But after all, she's my own sister. And it's impossible anything will be found by investigation and trying.
Just a minute. I'm afraid I'm the heel now, Miss Claudine. I'm afraid I want to know about those glasses. Because if there's any chance Professor Fulton's accidental death was really murder, then the sleeping dogs are going to be waked up.
Oliver.
Well, Johnny, what are you doing in here in the senator's old room? And a handful of papers, huh?
Yes, George, look. A letter addressed to you.
Give me your hand.
Professor Fulton's first letter to us.
Yeah, that's it, Angel. Now, you just hold still,
Oh, no, please. That was just in my pocket. I brought it to show you. He gave it to me the night he died.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But he did. He found it and realized he forgot to mail it. He'd warned in the desk. I was here looking for that.
Oh, no? Then what were you looking for?
Valentine! Mr. Valentine! What in heaven's name are you doing? What are you doing?
Hello, Bertha. Hello, Claudine.
Mr. Valentine, will you please be good enough to throw this man out?
Just a second, Miss Colliver. I caught our taxi driver friend here rifling your father's desk.
What?
Yes, but I...
All right, all of you. Now,
Valentine.
listen. Angel, there wasn't much in that first letter to us from the professor.
Huh?
Just what Hines figured. The professor wanted us to help locate Hubert, that's all.
What's that?
Never mind. Let's stay with you, Buster.
Valentine, I'm not a criminal. I'm not a housebreaker.
No, you're a taxi driver. A most distinguished citizen.
Thanks, Claudine. I come up here to help you, Valentine. Honest, I did. Only stopped by in the old senator's room because it's where they keep all the family papers.
The what?
No, it's not.
Oh, yes, it is. I wanted to make sure I wouldn't find something. Something I guessed about for a long time. Maybe you and Hines should know. Nobody else does. They've pretended so well.
Johnny!
Because looking out for poor Hubert up there is the important thing, isn't it?
Johnny, stop it! Please stop it! Please
What I
stop
didn't
it,
find,
please
I knew
stop
I wouldn't
it.
find. The most important paper in the world are these crazy Colliver girls. It's a paper that doesn't even exist. A marriage license. It's true, isn't it, Claudine? Hubert up there and your little sister Esther were never married. You and Bertha just pretended all these years so no one would take him away. That's why you never touched his money, so you wouldn't have to show any proof.
I see no reason why a lady need even answer such...
Oh, golly, George.
Claudine's still beautiful, isn't she? But you see, gossip's true, I guess. Two spinsters couldn't stand to lose the only nice guy who's been in this house in the last 15 years. When Hubert got banged up in that accident with Esther, well, he's never been in shape to fight his way out.
Yeah, I'm learning things fast, Johnny. Only I'm afraid there's still a little
Valentine, listen to me. Hines said you was talking something about glasses.
I still am.
The professor's death was an accident. Can't be any question about that. I noticed about the glasses, too.
You did?
Sure. I was here that night. I was a witness.
Okay, witness. Claudine found the glasses in Bertha's room. Now let's hear your testimony.
Bertha's room? But the professor had them on when he fell. I know he did. He was wobbling anyway. That's when he gave me your letter. Mumbled something about he'd forgotten to mail it.
The professor was wobbling?
He is no good. He's full of liquor. That's what I was doing here, bringing him liquor. That's why he stumbled. The girls is downstairs. I knew he was, because I was just outside and come running back in.
And his glasses?
I'm positive he had them on, laying there on the floor at the foot of the staircase before I went out to get a doctor.
Yeah, I get it. So what happened to the glasses after that still doesn't make sense, but at least his death was an accident.
You can ask the coroner. There was other evidence.
Why didn't you tell us earlier? Why did you wait until now for a lot of things? Coming here, sneaking, being caught. That scene with Claudine and Bertha, hurting them like that instead of just telling us.
You know, don't you, lady?
Yes, I think so.
Sure. I've been hurt myself.
Claudine?
Nobody's good enough for her. And besides, he's been hurt too, hasn't he? I don't think he's happy here, do you? You hear that? I guess he wants something.
Oh, George, listen. Hubert's bell. Something must be the matter with him.
Come on.
No, hold it, both of you. Johnny, isn't there a back stairway up there?
Well, sure.
Okay, get up there fast, but don't let anybody see you. I'm finally getting my cap on straight.
What?
Now, Angel, we're not going up. We're going downstairs. Come on.
The bell. Let go of me. Mr. Valentine, something's wrong with Hubert. Let me go.
I came down to stop you, Bertha. Be quiet, will you?
I've got to go upstairs. He needs me.
Quiet. Now, calm down. We'll do it. You can't go running all over the house.
He needs me. He needs me. I love him. He needs me.
Look,
George. Oh, George, I better find the light.
No, she's fainted, that's all. I want it dark. She's all right. Now, back we go, Angel, and do as I say. Now, this is it, Angel. Start panting.
Oh,
now.
George. She'll know I'm not Bertha.
It's dark here. Go on.
Okay.
Perfect. Hold your breath.
Bertha? Bertha, dear, is that you? Did you hear the bell? Hubert is all right. I've looked in on him. You needn't have come. You shouldn't have come running up the stairs like that, Bertha. You know you have a bad heart. Bertha, you shouldn't... Oh, dear, you fall. Bertha!
I'm all right.
Oh!
Yes, it's just us, Claudine. Your sister just fainted downstairs. Take care of her, will you, Brooksy?
Yes, sure, George.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm afraid there wasn't any heart attack. So I guess there isn't any murder, is there?
Mr. Valentine...
Just like there wasn't any murder of the professor. But you thought it might be a good idea if I thought there was, hiding those glasses and pretending to find them.
I can't talk about it. I won't talk about
Why should you? There isn't anything to say. I guess it was you who thought up the idea years ago of keeping Hubert here. But it wasn't for his money, was it? Pride, I guess. Something to do with your life, with those dreams you live in.
Oh, no.
It might have gone on forever if the professor hadn't shown up trying to get his hands on Hubert's money.
You contemptible, beastly, contemptible.
It was just your good luck the professor had an accident. Oh, sure, I'm not nice. But you had to use me, didn't you? With Johnny sniffing around and Bertha all upset, you had to think up something so Mr. Hines wouldn't catch on to the real secret and take Hubert away forever. Hubert might be able to declare himself someday, and your ugly sister just might like it.
She can't have him. She can't.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it?
She can't
Lady,
have
what
him.
makes you tick if you...
I don't love him, but she can't. Doctor can't. Bertha can't. I don't love him. I don't love him, but she can't. The marble's from Italy, but the design is yours. Isn't it, Father?
Father?
You built it for me. Rose-colored marble for the color of my cheeks. I'm the most beautiful, you always say, Father. I'll be married first, you say, Father.
Oh, Lord. Miss Colliver, please.
But I'm ready now. And there's music now. Music all the time. And there's orange blossoms and rose petals. Which one is it, Father? Show me the young man who's to be my husband. Give me your arm, Father. Lead me down the staircase. The rose petal staircase.
Oh, poor Claudine.
Bertha, please. Hubert's watching us.
I can't help it. It's my fault, too. Just as much my fault. I've turned bitter and hateful.
Oh, but she helped make you that way. Make you so jealous of him.
Oh,
you're not too old to change.
It's so... Looking at it now, it's so unhealthy. Two old maids pretending. Why, I must be insane like she...
No, you're not. And anyway, think of Hubert. Someone still has to take care of him. He'll be getting better now. The doctor said so.
Yes. And look at me. Ugly and spiteful.
Bertha, look at him. He's crying. Can't you tell?
Why? Hubert. Would you like me to read to you?
George.
Yeah, Angel, I'm here.
From you have I been absent in the spring, when proud-pied April dressed in old trim.
Time to go, isn't it? From you have I been absent in the spring. Brooksy, I guess spring's a pretty good thing not to miss, isn't it?
If you've had showers in your locality recently, you probably know exactly where your umbrella and raincoat are. But did you know that Chevron Supreme gasoline is also prepared for the whims of October weather? That's because it's climate-tailored according to the season and to each different altitude and temperature zone in the West. Depend on it to get the best out of your car wherever you drive any month in the year. Try a tank full of premium quality Chevron Supreme tomorrow. You'll notice right away how your car responds better. Faster starts, faster pickup in traffic, ping-free power on hills. You'll agree you can't buy a better gasoline for today's high-compression engines. Ask for Chevron Supreme at independent Chevron gas stations and at standard stations where they say and mean we take better care of your car. And now here is Robert Bailey.
Who cares about the kid next door, the boy from the broken home, the little guy who's always getting into trouble? You care when you give all you can to your community chest. For your community chest dollars help pay for child guidance, foster homes, Boy Scout organizations, vital services that healthy youngsters need. So when you give, please give enough. Enough for all community chest agencies. Enough for a full year.
Tonight's adventure of George Valentine has been brought to you by Standard of California on behalf of independent Chevron gas stations and standard stations throughout the West. Robert Bailey is starred as George with Francis Robinson as Brooksy. Let George Do It is written by David Victor and Jackson Gillis and directed by Don Clark. Also heard in the cast were Paul McVeigh as the professor, Lorene Tuttle as Claudine, Jeanette Nolan as Bertha, Ed Begley as Johnny, and Franklin Parker as Hines. The music is composed and presented by Eddie Dunstetter, your announcer, John Heaston. Listen again next week, same time, same station, to Let George Do It. This is the Mutual Don Lee Broadcasting System.
Welcome back. Well, once again, we learned from the writers that there may not be anything more potentially spooky than more than one spinster living together. This one definitely had a pretty good psychological drama going on here. Though in a couple places it did come close to almost Mr. Keene style melodrama, but didn't quite cross over that line. And here, I think that in these last few episodes, we have really been seeing the value of Claire Brooks to the team and the ability of her emotional depth and understanding to help George in his work. I will say that may be one of the things that does set her apart from other female sidekicks, because they tend to be a little more flat, one-dimensional, and Brooksy, I think, really presents the real deal here. By the way, if you are wondering where did that line from "You have I been absent in the spring" came from, it actually was from Shakespeare. It was not from any of his plays, though. It was from Sonnet 98. Well, now we turn to listener comments and feedback. We got this from, speaking of Let George Do It, we have this email that came in. Lisa says, I love the show, Let George Do It. Never heard it before. I'm a Bob Bailey fan from yours truly, Johnny Dollar. The humor is awesome. By the way, I love the commercials in all old-time radio shows. That is part of the experience. And no, I'm not taken back to my childhood either. I was born in 1969, so I'm a second generation, not first. I fell in love with old-time radio about 12 years ago and have been an avid collector ever since. I love all things vintage, so the commercials are as dear to me as the shows. I don't know why so many complain about them. I've heard many of the shows that you share, but I can listen to them over and over. I bought your app and have started from the beginning. Keep up the good work, Adam, and thank you for your dedication. And that's from Lisa in Indiana. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. We then have a couple iTunes reviews. Char writes in, I love these stories, but their historical value is underappreciated. You can tell a lot about what people were thinking by listening to their entertainment. Adam Graham is the only podcaster who bothers to run these episodes in order, so if you listen carefully, you can hear the changes in values of the times. Some of what goes on is quite startling. Adam's responses are cute, if sometimes naive. He is adorable, and oh so very young. If you have any interest in history, you will enjoy the podcast, and if you live on one of the coasts, you will find Adam's reactions very different from your own relatively jaded ones. I've listened to several old-time radio podcasts, and this one is by far the best. Well, thank you so much. I guess it's good to be adorable at 30. Thanks, really appreciate the comment there. And we got this one from Jim, who says, thanks to Adam Graham for replacing TV with the great detectives. Listening to these radio programs allows the imagination to enhance the performance, whereas TV creates sensory overload. And I definitely would agree, particularly with the modern shows. Even since I was a teenager, television has just gotten so fast and almost manic in its movements. And that's a part of the reason why, if I'm watching something, it's usually something a bit older. Anyway, Jim wraps up by saying, Adam's style and comments compliment the listening pleasure. Great job. Well, thank you so much, Jim. I really appreciate the comments. We'll be back tomorrow with Sherlock Holmes. Well, before we do get started, I want to encourage you, if you have not already, to check out Netflix. Netflix provides you a great value for your entertainment dollar. You can get unlimited DVD rentals, access to an ever-growing number of instant watch titles, all for less than $10 a month. And their library on both fronts has an array of different television shows, movies, for whatever your taste might be. You can take Father Brown, Nero, Wolfe, Sherlock Holmes. You can find it all on Netflix. To start your trial, go to netflix.greatdetectives.net. Well, now we're going to get into today's adventure, and this is actually the first time, and certainly won't be the last, that we replay or play a different adaptation of a Sherlock Holmes story we've heard before. We heard this one done originally from the 1930s. We heard that back in 2009. Now we're going to hear one with Tom Conway and Nigel Bruce. It's The Adventure of the Devil's Foot.
Kreml Hair Tonic and Kreml Shampoo present the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes, starring Nigel Bruce as Dr. Watson and Tom Conway as Sherlock Holmes. Now suppose we begin by calling on Mr. Holmes' biographer and friend, the genial Dr. Watson. We find him in his comfortable firelit study, leaning back in his easy chair, ready to begin his story. The fire feels good tonight, doesn't it, Dr. Watson?
Indeed it does, but sit down, Mr. Bell. Sit down and let's get on with the story.
You are in a hurry, aren't you?
Well, I suppose I am. As a matter of fact, the adventure I'm going to relate was one of the most gruesome experiences I ever hoped to encounter. Perhaps I'd better not tell it after all. It brings up memories
Oh,
that...
come now, Dr. Watson. You're not going back on us now. You promised last week to tell us, what was the name of the story?
The Adventure of the Devil's Foot, or the Cornish Horror. The very thought of it makes my blood run cold.
I can hardly wait, Dr. Watson. But first, men, I'd like to remind you about this famous modern trend in hair grooming, which is preferred among top-flight executives and America's most successful men. It's called Kreml Hair Tonic. One of the many reasons Kreml has become such a nationwide favorite is that it never plasters the hair down with sticky goo, which makes your hair and scalp feel so dirty. It never gives hair that old-fashioned, greasy, patent leather look. You see, Kreml is a very highly specialized hair tonic. It contains a unique and utterly different combination of hair grooming ingredients, which is found in no other hair tonic. That's why Kreml keeps unruly hair so neatly in place longer, with such a handsome, healthy-looking luster. What I especially like about Kreml is that after you use it, you can run your hand back over your hair and your hair never feels sticky or dirty. No greasy film comes off on your hand. Yet Kreml hair keeps hair in perfect order throughout the busiest day, always looking so handsome and well-groomed. Kreml, Kreml Hair Tonic. Now, Dr. Watson, how about the Devil's Foot or the Cornish Horror?
It was the spring of the year 1897. Holmes's iron constitution had shown some signs of giving way due to a particularly arduous and nerve-wracking winter. In March of that year, Dr. Moore Agar of Harley Street gave positive injunctions that Holmes get out into the country for a protracted rest. Well, the third week in March found us settled in a small cottage near Poldhu Bay at the further extremity of the Cornish Peninsula.
Isn't that rather a bleak country for convalescent, Dr. Watson?
Bleak is putting it mildly. I've never known such grim surroundings, but it suited Holmes admirably. He seemed to blossom in that weird and foreboding fog-swept district.
Just his natural perverseness, I suppose.
Oh, I dare say. Our little whitewashed cottage stood on a grassy headland. From its windows, we looked down upon the whole sinister semicircle of Mounts Bay, that old death trap, with its fringe of black cliffs and surge-swept reefs. In every direction there were traces of some vanished race which had left as its sole record strange monuments of stone. Holmes spent most of his time pottering round these weird ruins. Everything was going along peacefully until one morning our simple and healthy routine was violently interrupted, and we were precipitated into the middle of a series of gruesome and nerve-shattering events.
Quite a surf this morning, eh, Watson? You can see the spray flung up against our windows, and we're a good 100 feet above sea level. I don't think I shall venture out today. Bad weather. Old boy is certainly lashing himself into a fine frenzy.
What do you mean, the old boy, Holmes?
The devil, Watson. The devil himself.
Oh, what are you raving about?
Didn't I tell you that the natives hereabouts refer to that seething death trap down there as the Devil's Cauldron? They think the old gentleman himself lives there.
How unsettling.
Yes, a very interesting superstition. You know, Watson, this locality is supposed to have been the last resort of devil worship in England.
Oh, really? Well?
Many scientists believe that those huge prehistoric monuments of stone were part of a temple given over to the Prince of Darkness.
Preposterous.
Oh, I don't know. It's as logical as most of the theories that endeavor to explain their existence. The superstition goes on to say that when the devil was finally driven from his temple, he took refuge in the bay down there. Yes, they claim that on stormy nights you can hear his hoofbeats as he races up and down the rocks.
Holmes, what are you trying to do? Give me a case of nerves?
Hello, what's this? What's this? Someone is running up our path, his cloak flapping about like a giant bat.
Why, it's that Tregennis fellow, the one who boards with the vicar.
Mortimer Tregennis, eh? I wonder what's happened. Face as white as a sheet. Couldn't look more upset if he'd seen Beelzebub himself. Open the door, Watson.
Mr. Holmes, thank heaven I find you at home. The most terrible thing has happened. I can scarcely believe it.
Oh, sit down, my dear fellow, sit down. That's better. Now, perhaps you can tell us what has happened.
My family, my sister, we were playing cards.
Oh, slowly now, take your time.
My family, my sister and my two brothers. It's too terrible. Why, just last night I was with them at the house. Tridanic warfare, it's called. All well and happy. We played cards, and now, without warning, I can't believe...
Easy, Tregennis, easy. There's a good fellow.
I left them last night. My sister Brenda, my two brothers, Owen and George.
What time was that?
The clock in the church steeple over at Polo was chiming 10 o'clock as I closed the front door behind me. I'd left them all in the card room, laughing and in good spirits.
And?
This morning, being an early riser, I was out taking a walk before breakfast when Dr. Richards overtook me in his carriage with the news that he'd been sent for on the most urgent call from Tridanic warfare. Something terrible had happened to my family. I jumped in beside him and he whipped up the horses.
And what did you find?
Oh, Mr. Holmes, it was terrible, ghastly. My two brothers and my sister, there in the card room just as I'd left them. But what a change. What a ghastly change.
Yes?
Brenda lay back stone dead in her chair. And my two brothers sat on each side of her, laughing and shouting and singing. The senses stricken clean out of them. And all three of them, my poor dead sister and my two demented brothers, retained upon their faces an expression of ghastly horror, a convulsion of terror.
How terrible.
Yes. Dr. Richard was so overcome at the sight that he fell fainting into a chair.
Anyone else in the house besides your sister and brothers?
Only Mrs. Porter, the old housekeeper.
I presume it was she who found them this morning.
Yes. She always goes through the house in the mornings, airing it out before the family comes down. When she reached the card room, the shock was too much for her. She's had a nervous collapse. We had to put her to bed.
Yeah, no wonder.
An exceptional case. Most exceptional.
That's what we thought. We could find no traces of strangers in or around the house. Nothing was stolen, nothing touched. The vicar believes you are the only one who can solve the case, Mr. Holmes. He insisted I come to you.
I shall be only too glad to handle the matter, of course. But first I must ask you a few questions.
Anything, Mr. Holmes, anything.
To begin with, Mr. Tregennis, why do you live with a vicar, separated from your family?
Well, as a matter of fact, we had a slight argument a few years ago about some property it was. But that was all settled long ago. We were on the best of terms.
Now, Mr. Tregennis, about last night. Do you recall anything at all that was out of the ordinary?
There was one thing that occurs to me. As we sat at the card table, my back was to the window. George was facing me. Suddenly, I saw him look hard over my shoulder out of the window. I turned quickly, and just for a moment, I thought I caught a glimpse of something moving.
Man or animal?
I don't quite know. My brother said he had the same feeling. It's uncanny, that's what it is. Something came into that room, and that something killed my sister and dashed the light of reason from my brother's mind. Something devilish it was.
If that should prove to be the case, I fear I shall be of very little assistance, Mr. Tregennis. But short of wrestling with his satanic majesty, I think perhaps we can solve your problem. Come, Watson. We'd best go down to Tridanic Water at once.
This is the house, Mr. Holmes.
Whose carriage is this coming down the drive with the blinds down?
There's somebody in it. Listen.
My brothers. My poor brother. It's Dr. Richard's carriage. He's taking them to Helston Asylum. It's too awful. My poor brother.
Easy, Tregennis, easy. Pull yourself together.
I'll do my best.
Good man.
Which are the windows of the card room?
This one here.
Oh, look out, Holmes. You've upset the watering can.
Dear, how clumsy of me. Sorry, Tregennis. I'm afraid I've drenched your boots.
No matter, Mr. Holmes, no matter. Shall we go in?
Yes. I have seen all I need to see out here.
This way. The card room is over here.
Do you notice anything, Watson?
No, I can't say that I do.
This is the card room.
I see the window's still open. The housekeeper left it that way, I presume?
Yes, she says it was locked on the inside when she came in.
Quite so. I think we may close it now.
Well, I'll do it, Holmes.
No, let me. Candles quite gutted out. Yes, cards still on the table. They had not risen from their chairs, I take it, and you left at 10. That sets the hour of death at some time before 11. Fire burned out. Why a fire? Had they always a fire in this small room on a spring evening?
It was cold and damp last night, Mr. Holmes. The fire was lit shortly after my arrival.
I see. Well, that seems to be about all. No disturbance of any kind. Strange.
Oh, come along, Holmes. Come along. The room gives me the jumps. There's something about the atmosphere, as though death was still hovering in the air.
I wonder. Come, Watson. We will return to our cottage. Should anything occur to me, Mr. Tregennis, I shall communicate with you. It won't do, Watson. It won't do. All the facts are negative.
Well, do you think Mr. Tregennis's account of his actions last night was truthful?
Quite, Watson. Quite. You remember the incident of the spilt watering can? I did that to obtain an impression of his foot.
I take it you succeeded?
I did. With that print as a sample, I was able to trace his movements last night. His story is correct. He left the house at about 10, went straight back to the vicarage and did not return. Nor did anyone else enter or leave that house.
Then it must have been the man or animal they thought they saw in the bushes. He must have returned and frightened them to death.
There was no such man or animal, Watson. Last night was a dark night. Anyone who had the wish to frighten these people would be compelled to put his face against the glass before he could be seen.
Well?
There is a 3-foot flower border outside the cardroom window. But there are absolutely no footprints there.
Yes, but that
means Mr. Tregennis' sister and her 2 brothers were alone when death struck the sister down and drove the brothers insane.
But, Holmes, that would be supernatural.
I hope not, Watson.
Look, here comes another visitor up our path. Stranger this time. Big, savage-looking fella.
That, my dear Watson, is none other than the famous Dr. Leon Sterndale.
Sterndale, the lion hunter and explorer?
Exactly.
What's he doing in this neighborhood?
Oh, I've heard he owns a little cottage about 5 miles down the coast. They tell me he lives there absolutely by himself when he isn't off on one of his expeditions. Never mind, Watson. I'll do the honors myself. Come in, Dr. Sterndale, come in.
Mr. Holmes?
Yes, and this is my friend, Dr. Watson.
How do you do?
How do you do? Mr. Holmes, I've come to you about the tragedy at Dannywater. The police are utterly at a loss. You have a keener brain.
Pardon me, Dr. Sterndale, but why are you so concerned in this affair?
Well, you see, during my many residences in this locality, I've come to know the family of Tregennis very well.
I see.
Their horrible fate has been a great shock to me, Mr. Holmes.
I'm so sorry.
As a matter of fact, I was on my way to Africa. I got as far as Plymouth when the news reached me this morning. I came straight back to help in the inquiry.
But that would make you lose your ship. One sailed for Africa this afternoon, if I'm not mistaken.
I can take the next.
When did you last see the Tregennis family, Dr. Sterndale?
I saw Brenda, Miss Tregennis, 3 days ago, just as I was leaving for Plymouth.
Oh. So you have been in Plymouth for the last 3 days?
Yes, in Plymouth.
But how did you get the news so quickly? Surely the Plymouth papers didn't carry an account of the matter in this morning's edition?
I received a telegram.
Telegram? Might I ask from whom?
You're very inquisitive, Mr. Holmes.
It is my business, Dr. Sterndale.
Very well. The telegram was sent by the vicar, Mr. Roundcay.
I see.
And now, Mr. Holmes, have you reached any conclusions?
Conclusions? No. That would be a trifle premature. But I have every hope of bringing this matter to a satisfactory termination. Satisfactory to me, that is.
Would you mind telling me if your suspicions point in any particular direction?
I do not feel that this is the moment to answer that question, Dr. Sterndale.
And I see that I've been wasting my time. I need not prolong this visit. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Close-mouthed fellow, Dr. Sterndale, isn't he, Holmes?
He told me more than he realized, Watson. But he knows even more.
How could he if he was in Plymouth?
But was he, Watson? That statement is something for us to look into.
In just a moment, we'll rejoin Sherlock Holmes as he endeavors to solve the strange mystery of Dannywater. But first, men, remember, if you want to keep your hair handsome and healthy looking, one of the first requisites is a hygienic scalp. So why settle for just any hairdressing when you can enjoy the extra advantages of a highly specialized hair tonic like Kreml? Kreml contains a special combination of hair grooming ingredients which is found in no other hair tonic. This is why it keeps unruly hair neatly in place longer with a rich, healthy-looking luster. Yet Kreml never gives hair that cheap, greasy patent leather look. It never leaves hair feeling sticky, gummy, or dirty. Your hair and scalp always look and feel so clean with Kreml. And if your hair is so dry it breaks and falls when you comb it, start using Kreml at once. Let it make your hair feel softer, more pliable, and look as if it had some body to it. Kreml is also fine to lubricate a dry scalp. At the same time, it removes dandruff flakes. A quick massage with Kreml helps stimulate the cutaneous circulation of the scalp. Notice how alive, how invigorated your scalp feels. So for better groomed hair, a more hygienic scalp, change to Kreml at once. Buy a bottle of Kreml at any drug counter. Ask for an application at your barber shop. Kreml, Kreml Hair Tonic.
I say, Holmes, must you go on smoking that foul pipe? The atmosphere's so thick I can hardly see across the room as it is. Oh, dear, I feel depressed. Who knows what evil thing is talking abroad in this neighborhood?
Light the lamp, Watson. It's the gathering twilight that makes you gloomy.
Rubbish. Look here, Holmes, what about that Dr. Sterndale? Do you think he did it?
No, Watson. I've been in communication with his Plymouth hotel. His story was correct. He had been there for the past 3 days, and he did receive a telegram from the vicar this morning.
Oh, and he couldn't possibly have had anything to do with the Turgenis tragedy last night.
Quite. I didn't think he had a connection with the tragedy. But there is a connection with... Now what?
Mr. Holmes! Oh, Mr. Holmes!
Open the door, Watson. Ah, my dear vicar, come in, come in. Dear me, you look as though you'd seen a ghost.
It's tracked him down. The curse of the family. He's dead. Dead with that same look of terror on his face.
Who's dead?
Mortimer Turgenis. In his study at the vicarage.
Great Scott.
My servant found him there, sitting beside his table, his face turned toward the window, and distorted with that same convulsion of fear that marked the features of his sister. Oh, my poor parish. Satan himself is loose among us. We are devil-ridden, Mr. Holmes. Devil-ridden. This was his study, Mr. Holmes.
Depressing atmosphere.
It was worse. I had the servant open the window. He's quite ill from shock, poor fellow.
What a terrible look on Turgenis' face, Holmes.
The whole body is contorted and convulsed in a very paroxysm of fear. You've never seen death in this form before, Watson?
No, never.
You know of no poison that would have this effect?
Good heavens, no.
Lamp is lit. It's burning over an hour. Notes the oil consumed. Yet darkness has just set in. Did anyone call at the vicarage this afternoon?
No. I was out myself, but my servant says he let no one in.
Then Turgenis was alone when he...
I wonder. The window was shut at the time of his death, but the lamp was lit. Curious. The window. Let's see. Window. Yes, by Jove, I think I found something.
What's that you're putting in your pocket, Holmes?
And the lamp. Of course, the lamp. Notice this powder which has been spilled on the base of the lamp? Red-brown powder. Give me an envelope, Watson. I must have these specks of powder.
Why are you so excited about the powder, Holmes?
Because it contains the solution of our mystery, Watson. It is the source and the solution.
Holmes, you haven't touched your supper. What a foul night. The wind's rising again.
Oh, have another cup of tea and be quiet, Watson.
I don't want to be quiet. I want to talk. I'm tired of waiting here listening to that blasted wind and the roar of the water down there below. Why did you send for Dr. Sterndale?
Because he's an authority on obscure African poisons.
Poisons? Why are you interested in poisons?
Watson, there are two striking points in common in both cases under observation.
Yes?
In both cases, the atmosphere of the room had a curious effect on the persons who first entered it. The housekeeper and the vicar's servant were both overcome, as was the doctor who was called in.
That's right. I hadn't thought of that. The room was still stuffy when we entered it.
Right. And in each case, there was combustion going on in the room. The fire in the first case, the lamp in the second, and the lamp was not necessary. It was still daylight when it was lit.
Yes, but I still don't see what...
Something was burned in each case which produced an atmosphere causing strange toxic effects. An unknown poison.
Good heavens.
I believe we have a sample of that poison in the brown powder spilled on the base of the lamp.
Well, how are you going to prove it?
I'm going to burn some of that powder and notice its effect. Just a small pinch of powder. Yes. Perhaps you'd better leave the room, Watson.
Leave you alone in here? Certainly not.
I warn you, it's risky.
Confound that wind. Come along. Let's get it on with it and get it over.
Very well. Place your chair opposite mine. Then we can watch each other for developments. If anything alarming happens, we can end the experiment.
All right. Come on. I'm ready.
Good. I put a pinch of the powder into our lamp.
Oh, I say, what a filthy smell.
Musky, subtle, nauseous.
Listen to the wind, Holmes. I'm afraid. I don't know why. That wind. I can feel my hair rising. Holmes, do you see it? That cloud bank, whirling, black and sinister. It's monstrous. It's concealing something too wicked to imagine. Holmes, it's coming nearer and nearer. Can't you smell it? Sulfur and brimstone. You hear that, Holmes? It's hoofbeats. Hoofbeats. I know what it is. I can see it. I can't stand this. It's too terrible. Holmes!
Watson, for the love of heaven, don't give in. Don't breathe. I'll smash the window. I'll smash... That's better. Breathe in, Watson. Breathe it in. It's good, clean air. Whew. By Jove, what a narrow escape. I had no idea it was so powerful.
I thought I saw...
I know. It's a poison that affects the nerve centers of the imagination. The strain is enough to kill a man or drive him crazy. Hello, there's someone knocking at the door.
So that's what I heard.
Air seems cleared out. Good thing there was a high wind. I'll close the shutters and draw the curtains. Watson, can you open the door now?
Yes, I think so. Phew, my knees are still shaking.
Good evening, Mr. Holmes. You sent for me?
Yes. Come in, Dr. Sterndale. Come in.
Oh, you look rather pale, both of you.
Yes. We've just been conducting a little experiment with the poison that killed Tregennis.
You?
Yes, Dr. Sterndale. Perhaps you'd like to tell us why you killed Mortimer Tregennis.
I? Preposterous. You can't prove it?
No. Let me tell you how you did it. You came over to the vicarage late this afternoon. You didn't want anyone to know you'd visited Tregennis. He was to let you in himself. But how could you attract his attention? You brought some pebbles with you, pink pebbles from a heap beside your house. You threw these at the study window, where you knew Tregennis was working. I found some of these pebbles on the windowsill. Tregennis came downstairs, let you in himself. You had a talk with him, made him light his lamp, placed a pinch of the poison powder in the flame, and left.
You're right, Mr. Holmes. I did kill Mortimer Tregennis. But I'm not guilty of the other atrocity. I swear I'm not.
I believe you, Dr. Sterndale. But you know who did it. Perhaps you'd better tell us about it.
Very well. It was Mortimer Tregennis.
What?
He admitted it before he died. Mr. Holmes, I've been in love with Brenda Tregennis for many years. We were to have been married when my work in Africa was finished. I've lived so long in places where man is a law unto himself. He killed Brenda in cold blood. He killed her. I have nothing else to live for. By heaven, I'd do it again.
How did Mortimer Tregennis get hold of the poison? It was something unusual, almost unknown.
Yes, it was powdered pes diable.
Pes diable? Devil's foot, eh?
Yes, a root found in Africa. Shaped like a foot, half human, half goat-like. I have the only specimen in England.
And you showed it to Tregennis?
Yes. He came over the other afternoon when I was packing. He was interested in my African curiosities, particularly this powder. How he took it, I can't say. I thought no more of the matter until I had received the vicar's telegram and learned how they died. I returned at once. Looking into the tragedy, I was convinced Mortimer Tregennis was the murderer, that he'd done it to gain control of the family fortune. There was the crime, but what was to be his punishment? What jury would believe such a fantastic story? No, I decided to take the law into my own hands. Perhaps if you ever loved anyone, you'll know how I felt.
Dr. Sterndale, what were your plans when you set out for Plymouth?
I had intended to bury myself in Central Africa. My work is only half finished.
Go and finish the other half, Dr. Sterndale. I do not feel called upon to prevent you.
What a gruesome story, Dr. Watson.
Yes, next to the famous Hound of the Baskerville adventure, that was the most gruesome experience that we ever had.
There's just one thing I'd like to know. What did you think you saw in that cloud of smoke?
Mr. Bell, you will have to believe me when I tell you it was too horrible to mention. Just to think of it is enough to make my blood run cold.
Ladies and gentlemen, in a moment, Dr. Watson will be back to tell us about next week's story. Girls, Powers models are famous for their beauty and charm. And one of their most outstanding characteristics is their glorious, shining, bright hair. Now, here's how they keep it so shining.
Powers models use Kreml shampoo. This amazing, beautifying shampoo has been especially developed to actually glamour bathe each tiny strand of hair revealing all its natural glossy luster.
Yes, and don't forget Kreml shampoo is wonderful for washing children's hair, too.
Of course it is, because there are no harsh caustics or chemicals in Kreml shampoo. And its luxurious active foam thoroughly cleanses scalp and hair of all loose dandruff as well as the dirt.
Girls, if you could only see how Powers Model's hair fairly radiates natural glossy highlights, I'm sure you'd want to try Kreml shampoo right away. You can get a bottle at any drug counter. Kreml, Kreml shampoo. Now, Dr. Watson, what about next week?
Well, now, let me see. Next week, I think I'll tell you about the adventure of the unfortunate brides.
Well, it sounds intriguing, Dr. Watson.
It was, Mr. Bell. It was indeed. Intriguing. It concerned a honeymoon in Scotland and a bridegroom who turned out to be a cold-blooded and ruthless killer.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure was adapted by Edith Meiser from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's story, The Devil's Foot. Nigel Bruce appeared by permission of California Pictures. Tom Conway through the courtesy of Eagle Lion Pictures. The Sherlock Holmes series is produced by Tom McKnight. This is Joseph Bell speaking for Kreml Hair Tonic and Kreml Shampoo, and inviting you to be with us next week at this same time, when Dr. Watson will tell us about the case of the unfortunate brides. This is ABC, the American Broadcasting Company.
Welcome back. Well, that seemed pretty familiar, and it should have been. Actually, we heard the name Edith Meiser in the script, and it's been a while since we have heard that name. She did the early Rathbone Bruce adaptations and those before it. But then by the time the 44-45 season rolled around, Green and Boucher were doing it. Apparently they just decided to pay for the reuse of a Edith Meiser script. Adaptations were definitely appreciated by the Doyle family and Holmes fans. Though it was actually a little bit more chilling than I remembered, and I guess that may be due to the quality of the acting and the directing. So it might be interesting to compare the two. This one from 1946, and then the one we did previously from 1936. Actually, this was from 47, excuse me. And see how the increasing knowledge of radio affected how the same script was performed. Well, we do have one comment on Podcast Alley. From Roger in Virginia, your knowledge and the tidbits you give is not only interesting, but puts things into perspective. I also admonish you in your moral values and not being ashamed to voice them. Continue the great work of keeping your audience entertained. Respectfully from Roger in Virginia. Well, thanks so much, Roger. It's much appreciated. We will be back tomorrow with yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Well, before we do get started, I want to remind you, as you're making your travel plans for the new year, wherever you happen to be going, remember Johnny Dollar Air. JohnnyDollarAir.com is powered by Priceline. It allows you to name your own price on hotels, rental cars, airline tickets, and even more. If you don't have an action-packed expense account, it can save you quite a bit of money. And your purchases help support the great detectives of old-time radio. So remember, go to JohnnyDollarAir.com first for all your travel plans. Well, let's get into today's episode of yours truly, Johnny Dollar, The Edward French Matter.
From Hollywood, it's time now for Edmund O'Brien as Johnny Dollar.
Mrs. French speaking. Who is this?
Oh, I'm sorry for my explosive greeting, Mrs. French. It's a habit I've gotten into. This is Mr. Dollar from the insurance company.
Oh, yes, I received a message that you'd called. But I don't think I understand you're coming to Chicago.
Well, I guess they haven't got around to writing you about it. They sent me here to talk to you about your son.
I see.
And then if we decide there are grounds for your fears about him, they've given me authority to go out to the Malay states and investigate the situation.
Oh, that's very nice of them. I am afraid for Edward.
I'll come out to see you about 1:30 then, Mrs. French.
Edmund O'Brien in a transcribed adventure of the man with the action-packed expense account. America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to Home Office Tri-State Insurance Group, Hartford, Connecticut. The following is an accounting of expenditures during my investigation of the Edward French matter. Expense account item 1, $95 airfare and incidentals between Hartford and Chicago, the home of Edward French's mother. There the story went about as follows. Edward French had left the States after the war and gone to the Malay States, where he managed a tea plantation, concentrating on sales to a buyer for the Jewel Tea Company. He'd married an English girl, and their life seemed pleasant enough, but a letter from a Constable Wicklow had reported the abrupt end of that. Edward, on a business trip to Singapore, had disappeared. The current crop of Malay guerrillas was suspected, but there was not one clue as to whether he was alive or dead. Expense account item 3, $1,283 airfare to Singapore. It was almost a week later that I jostled my way through the crowded streets to the office of the Jewel tea buyer, Mr. Neeps.
You know, it's odd, Mr. Dollar. You won't believe this, but I was thinking of Ed just as you walked through that door.
You knew about the disappearance?
Oh, yes. Constable from Raoub sent word down a week after he'd been here.
Oh, Mr. French did come here after he left his plantation.
Yes, we finished our business in the afternoon and went to dinner at the club that night. He left the following morning.
Did you hear from him the following morning?
Well, no, but I knew that was his plan. Actually, I wasn't worried about him even after I heard about it. Ed's, not peculiar, I guess, but strong-willed. If 50 men told him not to swim across a river, he'd do it just to please himself. You get to expect the unexpected from him. I don't know if I make myself clear.
I think I understand.
Selfish may be a better word. What I mean is that it would be like Ed to suddenly leave for some place without bothering to tell anyone.
Not even his wife?
Well, first of all, not his wife. Now, don't misunderstand. I like Ed, but I can't help disapproving of some of the things, like the way he treats Catherine. But none of my business. I like him in spite of those things. I think Ed will show up when he gets ready to and laugh at the trouble he's caused.
You don't put any stock in the idea that the guerrillas might have got him, huh? Bandits, I understand you call them?
Yes. Well, of course, there's always that possibility. A planter is killed now and then, but I'd expect Ed to be the last one.
If he just took off someplace as you suspect, would you have an idea where he'd go?
No, I'm afraid I wouldn't. It's a big world, you know.
Yeah. How do I get to Raoub? I began to appreciate the state of siege British Malaya is living under when I boarded the train the next morning. All the windows in all the cars were covered with wood, hard and thick enough to withstand fair-sized bullets. At the stopping point near Raoub, I was met by 2 native policemen armed with Bren guns who drove me the rest of the way in a jeep that had been encased in armor. There was no trouble, but by the time I reached the police station in Raoub, I had a healthy respect for the dank wall of jungle that pushed in from all sides and the unseen enemy it hid. Because on the way, I was notified by the native driver that Constable Wicklow had been killed from ambush the day before. His replacement was Constable Downs.
It's a nasty business, cleaning them out. Poor Wicklow'd been at it for almost a year.
Well, it must have happened after I talked to the police in Singapore.
Yes, last night. They attacked the Stewart estate. That adjoins French's. Wicklow was killed on the way out with reinforcements. They'll single out the leader every chance they get.
What do you know about French's disappearance?
Very little, I'm afraid. I read Wicklow's report when I learned you were coming. Undoubtedly the work of the bandits, although it might appear to be kidnapping.
Kidnapping? That's a new theory.
Oh, hardly a theory yet. But it's not been their habit to conceal the bodies of their victims. This is the first case on record where a vehicle has been taken.
I didn't know about that either.
That's what Wicklow's report said. That's all I know about it.
Constable, I want to go out and talk with his wife. How do you...
take the Jeep by all means. It's rather late in the afternoon to start out. If you can't be sure of getting back here before dark, well, there's hardly any possibility that you'll take a chance. The native boys simply won't start back. They'll stay behind the barricade there for the night, and so will you.
The French estate, like the others, maintained about 50 private soldiers who held defensive positions about the place 24 hours a day. By the time I got there, they had pulled in for the night and were manning a tight perimeter around the main house. As the jeep passed through it, I saw that they were fairly well armed with rifles, light automatic weapons, and grenades. In sight of all this, waiting on the veranda, and dressed as though she were about to leave for a cocktail party, Mrs. French looked entirely out of place. Mrs. French?
Yes?
Oh, didn't Constable Downs telephone about my coming? He said he would.
Constable Downs? I'm afraid he wasn't able to. Our telephone wires have been out.
Oh. Well, my name is Dollar, Mrs. French.
How do you do?
I'm here from the States to investigate the disappearance of your husband.
The United States? I don't understand.
I was sent by the insurance company that carries the policy on his life. It's quite a big policy, you know.
Yes. Please sit down.
Thank you.
Mr. Dollar, you must understand what our fears are. That Edward has been killed by the bandits.
There's no proof of that yet. As a matter of fact, Constable Downs seems to think there's a fair possibility that he hasn't been.
What did he say?
That they never bother to hide anyone they've killed, and your husband's body hasn't been found. Also that they never steal cars, and your husband's car hasn't been found.
I haven't dared to hope. What does he think it means?
I don't think he's sure, but he mentioned kidnapping. I didn't know until I talked to him that your husband had been in his car when he disappeared. Does that mean that he drove to Singapore?
Yes, he always drove.
Through more than 200 miles of jungle during an emergency like this? Why would he do that?
Because everybody told him that he shouldn't. My husband was like that.
You're convinced that he's dead, aren't you?
Well, I haven't dared to hope. I thought the worst was that it...
Mrs. French.
Where did it come from?
It's hard to tell. That way, I thought. Now, you'd better sit down, Mrs. French. Come on. Come on, sit down. About 15 minutes later, I thought I understood her violent reaction to the shots in the far distance. A small lorry pulled up in front of the house, and a blond man of 30 or so years got out of it. He was introduced to me as Keith Stewart, manager of the adjoining estate. From one brief look that passed between Mrs. French and him, I thought I understood who she had been afraid for.
Well, I dare say that nobody would travel all the way out here if I caught it. You Americans are a surprising lot.
Yes, I suppose so.
And by the way, I very nearly did catch it.
We heard the shooting.
How many were there, Keith?
Hard to tell. As usual, I could scarcely see the beggars. But their number's not as important as the fact that they're still in the vicinity after last night. I'm afraid we shall have to expect another raid tonight.
The telephone lines have been cut.
Yes, I rather thought they had. I tried to call. That's why I popped over. I think we can expect them here tonight. Is that your Jeep, Mr. Dollar?
Constable Downs let me use it.
I wouldn't try to return to Raoub until morning if I were you.
2 hours later, it was dark. A double guard had been posted, and floodlights glared out in a 200-yard circle around the house. There was a rather strange supper shared by Mrs. French, Keith Stewart, and myself. The association between the two was obvious to me by the time coffee was served, and the rest of it came out later that night. I couldn't sleep in the uneasy house, and at 11 I left my room to go get some air on the veranda. But they were already there. And what I overheard from inside the house just about settled the case as far as I was concerned. I was waiting for a definite statement when the conversation was interrupted.
They're here. Go inside, Captain.
What is it, Stewart?
Well, sir, did our little war awaken you?
I wasn't asleep. You said you had a weapon for me?
Yeah. Inside, Captain.
All right. Please be careful.
Right over here, Mr. Dollar. Not a gun of American manufacture. Are you familiar with the Thompson product?
Yeah, thanks.
You'll have to arm it. The chamber's empty. Now then, you're going out there with me?
That's what you wanted, wasn't it?
Very good. Rather an odd way to carry on an insurance investigation, isn't it?
That's right. But you would hardly call this an ordinary case.
return you to the second act of Yours Truly, Johnny Dollar, in just a moment. There have been some changes made, and it's faster, it's funnier, it's got new life and brand new punch because Jan Murray's taken over. What show is this? Why, CBS's Saturday night musical quiz, Sing It Again, an hour of melody, mirth, and money that's heard on most of these same CBS stations. Yes, Jan Murray is your new host. Alan Dale, Judy Lynn, the Riddlers, and Ray Block are your music makers. And there's still loads and loads of cash for identifying the phantom voice. Be sure to hear the new Sing It Again starring Jan Murray tonight on CBS. Now with our star, Edmund O'Brien, we return you to the second act of Yours Truly, Johnny Dollar.
Converge your fire! Converge! Blast to keep that lane covered! We've other guns to look about for targets.
There's a movement to the left, Stewart.
Good man, 2 of them. Take them if you like.
There's 100 of them.
The main force all right. Swing your fire! You there! Concentrate on their rear. You two, Dollar. Straighten them out!
We'll be in the enfilade position.
Grenades! Grenades! Now!
Thanks, man.
Well, good morning, Mr. Dollar. Bandits gave you a bit of a go last night, I'm told.
It was over by 2 a.m. I'm sorry I got your men into it, Constable.
Oh, nonsense. They're policemen. You brought them both back, didn't you?
Yes, the one death we had was a boy from the estate.
Ah, beastly business. What about the bandits?
I don't know. I didn't stay to count. There's been a development in the French disappearance that will probably surprise you.
Oh?
I overheard a private conversation between Stewart and Mrs. French. Or at least they thought it was private. I can think only one thing after hearing what they said. They're back of French's disappearance, not the bandits.
Oh, see here now.
I told you it'd be a surprise, but it's the truth.
You suspect that there's something between them?
It's more than a suspicion. I know that to be a fact.
Good Lord.
They talked about whether or not French knew about their association and whether or not he'd mentioned it to somebody who could have told me about it. She's afraid I'm suspicious of them, she said. What else could they have been talking about, Constable?
I don't know. Good Lord. Did it sound as though they'd killed him?
Yes, it did. But unfortunately, an overheard conversation isn't much in the way of proof.
No. Pity the body hasn't been found.
That would help. He didn't say so, but I sort of assumed that Stewart has a wife. Is that right?
Yes, he has. Rather a pathetic, sickly woman.
You can't say that about Mrs. French.
Oh, no. I suppose one couldn't.
I wonder if you could call Stewart into town for something this afternoon. Maybe a report on last night's action. I'd like to talk to his wife.
Why, yes, I imagine I could. I'll ask 2 or 3 of the planters. As a matter of fact, I should arrange a meeting to discuss common defense. But good Lord, Dollar, this possibility is astounding.
It was almost too hot to move when Constable Downs opened his meeting, but I jeeped to the Stewart estate and was admitted to the room where Mrs. Stewart was resting, a pale, fever-ridden woman.
Mr. Dollar, you've traveled a great distance in order to ask questions. I find rather strange your hesitancy now that you are here.
There are some questions that are particularly hard to ask. They're about your husband, Mrs. Stewart.
Yes?
Do you know about your husband and Mrs. French?
Of course I've known. He's in love with her. And I don't care.
Has he spoken of divorce?
Under British law, Mr. Dollar, it was in my place to
speak of divorce. Why do you ask?
I wondered if he or they had any plans for the future.
I assure you that any of Keith's plans for the future will include me. Unless he kills me. At times I wish he would.
Do you think Edward French knew about his wife?
I don't know.
Mrs. Stewart, I don't know if you really think your husband is capable of killing you, but it looks very much as though he did kill Edward French.
I hope he did. And I hope he's punished for it.
Can you think of anything that might help me prove that he did?
No. Oh, I wish I could remember.
French disappeared about a month ago. Evidently, he left Singapore in his car. If your husband killed him, he would have to have met him on the road back. Can you remember your husband leaving for any length of time about a month ago?
Yes. Yes, I do remember. A month ago. He left before noon in his lorry. He was gone for 2 or 3 hours.
Did he say where he'd gone?
No. I asked him, and he said he'd been inspecting the groves. But he was lying.
It was hard to know whether she was speaking the truth or what was manufactured by her hate for her husband. When I left her, I went back to the French estate. Mrs. French was reportedly too ill from the previous night's excitement to see me at the moment, and I was told to wait. I waited until an hour before dark and then was faced not by the lady of the estate, but by Keith Stewart.
My wife told me about your visit, Mr. Dollar.
She did? I was hoping that she wouldn't.
I'm sorry that you bothered her. She's quite ill. At times, what she says has entirely no basis of reason.
Oh? She seemed to be all right when I saw her.
She told you that I killed Edward French. Do you think that's a reasonable statement?
She didn't tell me that.
And why should she say that she did?
Probably because I told her.
You told her?
Yeah.
Why would you think a thing like that, Mr. Dollar?
Because it doesn't look like natives' work, for one thing. The body hidden, the car missing.
That doesn't necessarily follow, Mr. Dollar. A jungle animal might have made off with his body. An armored auto such as his could be sold quite easily for a great deal of money.
His body might also offer proof of who killed him. The car, too, possibly.
I'm afraid you're in error, Mr. Dollar. Edward was killed by bandits.
How do you know that?
Considering the number of deaths attributable to them, I think it's safe to assume.
You're in love with his wife.
I make no secret of that, sir.
You made no secret of your conversation with her last night, either.
What do you mean?
I mean on the veranda last night, just before the attack.
I see.
You told her there was nothing to worry about, if you'll remember. But you were wrong.
I'm afraid you were, too, Mr. Dollar. Spying is not looked upon with any amount of favor here.
It's not my usual method, but your stupidity made it almost unavoidable. How do you think the murder is going to be received?
I insist there was no murder per se. Edward was killed by the bandits.
Keith.
Catherine, will you go back to your room, please?
No, Keith. I have a right to know what's being said.
Nothing is being said, my dear, that would be of any interest to you.
Why do you say that, Stuart?
I've been listening, Keith. I have a right to be here.
All right, my dear. As you know, then, we were discussing the possibility that I might have killed your husband. It's a groundless discussion, since even if Mr. Dollar were convinced that I had, there would be the matter of proof.
I've been expecting that.
And you have a solution?
Not at the moment. But let me tell you this. I have Constable Downs convinced, too. He arranged the meeting of you planters this afternoon only to give me time to talk to your wife.
Keith.
Please, Catherine, be quiet.
The constable has probably radioed our suspicions to Singapore by now, so you can see that the ball is rolling, so to speak.
Catherine, be quiet. Go to your room, Catherine. It'll be better if you go to your room.
You can see she's ready to break down right now. I don't think you have a chance, Stuart.
She had nothing to do with it, Dollar. I'll accept full responsibility. We did fall in love. Edward was a beast.
That has nothing to do with it, has it?
If you'd known him, you'd realize that it had a great deal to do with it. He deserved to die. Life is cheap here in the Malay States. Good men have been dying. He wasn't a good man. He was a beast. And I took the emergency and used it to my advantage. To Catherine's advantage.
You met him when he came back from Singapore?
Yes, I drove my lorry to meet him. I feigned engine trouble, and when he got out, I shot him and drove away. But I didn't tell Catherine until after I'd done it.
Do you want to go into town to give your story to Constable Downs, or shall I send in for him?
I'll go in. If you wouldn't mind, I'd appreciate it if I could go to my estate first.
It's close to dark.
I'd appreciate it.
We'll go in the Jeep then. I've got 2 armed men in there.
All right, Mr. Dollar. I won't say goodbye to Catherine. If we could leave now.
Oh, you're carrying an automatic. I'd better take that. All right, we can go now. It was too close to dark when we swung into the last mile of his estate. The jungle seemed to press in closer than ever. The orange sun had sunk below the trees by the time we reached the house. The guard was set, and I wondered if I had spent another night with a Thompson in my hand. We walked into the house, and there faced a man I didn't recognize until Stewart screamed his name.
French! French, but how?
An emaciated Edward French, a scarecrow, half alive, and holding a pistol in his hand.
French. Edward.
Yes, Keith.
No, Edward, no!
You are Edward French?
Yes, I'm Edward French. I'm still alive. I stayed alive so I could come back and face the man who thought he'd killed me. How is Catherine?
Edward.
Is she happy thinking I'm dead? She should have known that I wouldn't die. I didn't die, Keith.
Keith was going in to give himself up, French.
You don't have to now.
Now, wait a minute. Let things go the way they're going.
I know how things are going. I don't know you, but don't try to stop me.
Edward. Look, Edward, there's nothing I can say. Nothing I can say, but Edward, there must be something.
Give me that thing, French.
Sure. There it is. Well, I've shown them a thing or two around here.
Yeah? You sure have. Expense account item 4, same as items 1 and 3, transportation back to the States in Hartford. Item 5, miscellaneous, $200. Expense account total, $2,739.50. Remarks? The story of French being left for dead and driving to a settlement hospital is too long to cover here. But he did, without letting anybody know who he was. The last I saw of him, he was being booked for murder himself. I had no idea that a cup of tea might have all this background. But I was there. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, stars Edmund O'Brien in the title role and is written by Gil Dodd with music by Wilbur Hatch. Edmund O'Brien's latest picture is the Paramount Pictures production, The Redhead and the Cowboy. Featured in tonight's cast were Jeanette Nolan, John McIntyre, Tudor Owen, Maria Palmer, and Dan O'Herlihy. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, was transcribed in Hollywood by Jaime Del Valle. This is Dan Coverly inviting you to join us next week at this time when Edmund O'Brien returns as...
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
For more adventure and mystery tonight, CBS brings you Hopalong Cassidy, Gangbusters, and Broadway is My Beat on most of these same CBS stations. Stay tuned now for Larry LeSueur with 5 minutes of the latest news, which follows immediately over most of these same CBS stations. This is CBS, where you laugh at Jack Benny every Sunday night, the Columbia Broadcasting System.
Welcome back. Well, this was another one of those episodes where we're presented with a murder mystery where we don't know anything about the characters involved that would make us like them or care about them, and we don't necessarily care about the outcome. This one also, I think, felt a little bit rushed here. It feels like it could have used another good 10 to 15 minutes to tell its tale. particularly as Johnny summarized what he heard on the veranda without actually showing it, which isn't something they usually do. Well, now we turn to listener comments, and we begin with one from Justin, who says, I've been listening to your show for quite some time now and thoroughly enjoy it. Your commentary often provides the detail I'm looking for when I want to know a bit more about the shows themselves. I most often will listen from my RSS feeder. I've noticed that some episodes use a different player than others. Why is that? It bothers me not one whit. I'm just curious about it. In answer to your question, I don't know. I do know those sort of players in RSS feeds, because I've got one on my feed reader as well, are individual to the particular feed reader company. Not something we necessarily control here. Anyway, it goes on to say, your show provides the background for my morning wind-up as I get mentally prepared for search for jobs. Unemployed for 8 months now. It really gets me in the right frame of mind. Whenever I get behind in listening and have an extra episode or two on the list, I'll listen in the evening too. I'm a do-it-yourself tinkerer type as well, and have considered building a radio in the antique style, complete with a tube-based amplifier, but powered by a digital player that I can turn on at any time and listen to the latest episode away from the computer and a pair of headphones. Keep up the good work, Justin. Well, thanks so much, Justin, and sounds like some inventive ideas. And best of luck to you on the job search. That is definitely a challenging place to be in. All the best to you. Then we have this comment from John. Thanks for your efforts. The podcasts are very entertaining. I have a question about the music you use to open each podcast. I've heard you say the music is from the Pat Novak series, but I'm sure I've heard the music elsewhere, but I can't remember where. I'm guessing it was from some PBS TV show, but I've not been able to track it down. Do you have any information on other uses of the music? It's driving me crazy trying to remember. Well, John, I'm not certain if it was you or not, but I actually got a previous question on this, and I still don't know. And as I don't watch really any PBS or anything else that doesn't come either over the internet or through Netflix, I don't know if I will pick it up. But if anyone else is aware, certainly email me, box13@greatdetectives.net. If you're aware of what another use of the theme music might be, because probably more than one person's curious about that. And then we just got another comment from Podcast Alley. Love the show. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate all the help we've gotten, and encourage everybody to vote once a month. As of this recording, we're number 4 on Podcast Alley. But, of course, that'll be 8 days from now when this actually is available. So do encourage people to continue to vote. I got another review, this one off of iTunes. I love the shows and Adam's commentary. He's very knowledgeable and gives the listener a lot of tidbits about actors, show release history, etc. The shows he's picked are perfect representatives of the genre. Keep up the good work. Thank you for a superb show. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate everybody's support. We'll be back next week on Monday with the Abbotts, and next week another episode of yours truly, Johnny Dollar. In the meanwhile, send your comments to box13@greatdetectives.net. Follow us over on Twitter at Radio Detectives. And you can always give us a call, 208-991-4783. From Boise, Idaho, though, this is your host, Adam Graham, signing off.